it's time to go.
From the hills and hollers of southern Indiana to the Lone Star State of Texas, we are the hunters of the paranormal. Truth seekers, mount up.
Good evening, Truth Seekers. We're back again. We got an awesome guest. His name is Preston Dennett. And you people in the UFO world probably know this guy very well. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's got a lot of stuff to tell us tonight. And without further ado, we'll jump right into it. How you doing, Preston? Doing all right?
Doing pretty good, yeah. How are you doing?
Awesome. Doing very well. Where would you like to begin, Preston, with this? Would you like to tell us how you got into it? Have you had some encounters, or?
Yeah, I have had some encounters.
Where would you like to begin, Preston?
Oh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback there.
Yeah. Is that on your end? Are you hearing that in your? Sorry, guys.
I think it's good on my end.
Yeah.
Sorry, right.
Sorry, Preston. This happens. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I think it's good on my end.
David, is that your speakers, David, that's doing that? Sorry, Preston. Everything's happening. There. How's that? I think, I think we got her lined out. All right, sorry guys, it's always something with us. I'm sorry, but
I apologize about that, everyone.
That's okay. That's all right, David. All right, Preston. Where would you like to begin? Have you had some sightings of your own, what made you decide to get into this?
Yeah, I actually did have several sightings over the years, but not until I started investigating this, actually, which I don't think is a coincidence. I don't know if the ETs knew that I was looking into them, but it wasn't until I started investigating this stuff that I started having sightings, because I came into this field as a skeptic. I did not believe in any of this at all until 1986, and that was when I found out that many people I knew were having encounters. It was all kind of coincidental. I heard a report on the news about a sighting over Alaska, and it interested me just enough to start asking people that I knew what they thought about UFOs. And that's when I found out, my brother Mark had seen a UFO. Two of my sister-in-laws had encounters. Several friends, people at work, at the office where I worked. So that kind of shocked me. I mean, it really did shock me. And I started checking out books on this subject and was shocked to find that there were books written about UFOs. I really had no idea. And found out about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. It's a large citizen UFO study group. So I ended up joining MUFON, becoming a field investigator, started going to UFO meetings. Yeah, all of this happened over a space of about a year or two. And that's how I kind of got introduced into this field.
Are you still involved with MUFON? Do you still do investigative work with them?
I still am a member. I did take their field investigator test and worked with them, investigating cases for about 5 years or so.
Five years.
Wow. But at some point just decided to go independent. I still, speak for MUFON groups across the U.S., mostly here in the Southwest, where I'm based, here in California.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I still support MUFON. There's a lot of really wonderful people in the organization, but mostly I'm independent.
Is there any one investigation that you were on that really stands out to you and really piqued your interest or
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I actually love every one of them because when you start digging into it, it's like, wow, especially when you get, you know, information that confirms it. But I think probably the biggest to this date was one of the earliest ones I did. I had written an article for the local newspaper where I grew up in Topanga Canyon about several sightings, some of the people that I knew. And it was in 1992 that the editor of the newspaper calls me up, Colin Pennow, and said that he had received a bunch of calls at his newspaper office. He had a police tape from people who had called the police station reporting UFOs. This was on June 14, 1992. And he played the tape for me. It had 4 callers. And one of them had been chased down the road by UFOs. So had another caller who said that this UFO came down and actually lifted their car up off the road.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were actually crying on this tape. And another guy was a professor at a college. He said he had woken up that evening because the whole interior of their house filled up with light. And they ran outside, and there was this thing right over their house, like 100 feet up, making a low buzzing noise.
Wow.
So
Buzzing noise, that's interesting.
Yeah, so these were the people who called the police, people who called the police station. One was a doctor, so a good witness. He had seen this object flit across the sky at super high speed. Another was a resident who lived along the boulevard that runs through this canyon, Topanga Canyon, and she had seen beams of light coming down. So he's like, these are these cases. Can you investigate it? And I grew up there, so I knew a lot of people. And I instantly found several witnesses on that one night, June 14th. And this turned out to be, such a huge case because this was a wave of sightings that went on for about 2 years and involved not only sightings, but landings, cars being chased on the road, there was like 7 instances of it, people being taken on board. I mean, everything. It was crazy. I called the police, gave them my number. They referred cases to me from people who were calling them. I put up flyers at the local markets and the bulletin boards, and I got a lot of calls from people. I ended up interviewing about over 100 people.
Wow. You did a lot of field research then. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I ended up
amazing.
writing it was crazy. I wrote a whole book about that one wave of sightings. But it was so interesting because on that night, June 14, 1992, I ended up interviewing about 30 separate adult witnesses in various locations, separated by several miles, some of them. And they all reported activity on that night. Some saw 1 or 2 objects, some saw 3, 5, 10. A few saw 20 or 30. And one couple I interviewed, they lived high up on a ridge. And they were out early that night and stayed out counting these things because they saw them coming up, not from above, but from below. These things were coming, out of the ocean maybe. I think that's where, honestly, they were coming from because I got another witness finally. But they counted, get this, they counted, I went up to their house and, they showed me where all this happened. They said they counted about 200. This is what the wife said.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. And the husband turns to her and says, honey, I don't know if it was that many. I think it was maybe 100. That was my reaction. I laughed. I bust out laughing. I'm like, 100, you guys, that's a lot.
That doesn't make it any less scarier, right?
Yeah, and he said, honestly, my wife is probably right. I wasn't really counting them. She was. And she says these things would come up in groups of 10 or 20 from behind the ridge and dart in all different directions. And one time, one of these things came right overhead, really low. They could see this little weird marking on the bottom. It was kind of a half disc shape, glowing, pretty much silent as far as they could tell. They called the police. The police said, no, we haven't received any calls. That was a lie. I knew for a fact that was a lie.
Did the description of these craft or whatever, did did they describe them as like orange balls of light, or were they disc shaped, or did they have? You said about a half a disc is what they saw, the claim that they saw.
Yeah. Well, I got different descriptions on that evening. Some people did report seeing this huge sort of cigar shape with smaller disc-like objects coming out of it. So I guess you'd call that a mothership.
Yeah.
And yeah, they described it mostly as disc-shaped, but the guy who had it hovering over his house said it was like a round, glowing sphere. He said it was so bright he honestly couldn't tell.
Mm-hmm.
But over the 2 years that this went on, and I got every shape you can think of, manta ray shaped, cigar shaped, disc shaped, spherical. One guy asked him, he says, well, I don't even know how to tell you this. And he had real difficulty describing it because he said it was kind of like a hexagon, but the sides were not particularly symmetrical.
Huh.
And yeah, there was 4 people in that sighting. I interviewed all 4. And one guy gave a really good interview because it sent down this beam of light. It struck their house and freaked him out. And the other guy couldn't sing, I'm not sure what it looked like. I'm like, well, you were right there. He says, honestly, Preston, I was too scared to look at it. I hid. I looked the other way.
That makes sense. I could see that.
Have you had any reports of beams of light coming down, but not touching the ground, coming down like shafts of light coming down to a point, before they hit the ground? Have you had any reports? What in the world are those?
Not normal lights.
I saw 7 of them out the front of our house right here. That's why I was asking, because they came down like pillars of light, but then they were like pointed at the end, but you could tell they weren't touching the ground. And it was just like they stopped just right before they would touch the ground. Yeah, and there were 7 of them.
I don't get a lot of those. Usually when someone says a beam of light came out of a UFO, it's boom, it hits the ground. Sometimes it's straight, sometimes it's kind of cone-shaped, like an upside-down ice cream cone.
Mm-hmm.
Often people will just say it's a very thick light, like almost opaque. You can't see through it. And but sometimes, it stops in midair. And like, how can you do that? We don't have beams of light that can do that.
Absolutely.
Right? And it became very clear to me that they've got a very profound and advanced understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum, because these beams of light can do all kinds of things. If you get struck by one of these beams of light, it can render you paralyzed temporarily. It can actually levitate you. It can pull you through solid objects like walls or through the roof. Mm-hmm. It can heal you. I've got a bunch of cases of people actually healed by these beams of light.
Wow.
All kinds of stuff that they can do. People have been burned. That's super rare, but it does happen.
Is that like the guy that was in the mountains looking for the minerals and he saw the UFO on the ground and walked up to it? I think he was a Russian guy, and the thing spun around and blasted him with some kind of radiation.
Yeah, he didn't get struck by a beam. I think he just came too close to a landed UFO. There's a good lesson there. That's how a number of these injury cases happen. Don't run up to a UFO unless, keep your distance. If you see ETs walking around it, that might be a little more safer. But yeah, a number of people have really regretted doing that and have gotten burned.
Have you had a lot of reports of people seeing craft landed with beings walking around it?
Some. That does not happen as much as I would like, because those are such interesting cases. I find them really fascinating. But absolutely, I have investigated some of those cases. One of my favorite was this lady by the name of Melody, who was at school, and I ended up, doing research into what I would call schoolyard UFO encounters. Who knew this was a thing? I can tell you it is. They are landing next to schools and showing themselves to children, and it's almost always elementary schools. Well, not always, but over half the cases. I found 100.
Right here in the United States?
All across the world.
I was going to say there was one, a famous one, wasn't it in South Africa or over in Africa where it landed?
Yeah,
And they were given a message, I take it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what got me interested in this. I'm like, this was at Rua, Zimbabwe, the one you're talking about.
Yes.
At Ariel Elementary School. And a UFO landed next to school. ETs came out, ET-looking figures, I should say. And some 200 kids were there on the playground.
Wow.
It's a crazy case. And I knew of another case in Melbourne, Australia, where UFOs landed next to Westall High School. Landed. And there was another one in Broadhaven, Wales. ETs came out again, landed next to the school. So I started doing research on this, and I was shocked. I found 100 cases, and they're landing in about a third of these cases. The rest are hovering very low. It's almost always during the day. And the case I investigated took place at Point Elementary School in St. Louis, Missouri. This was like 1966 or so. And a group of, all these kids were on the playground. And the lady I interviewed, Melody, and her friends decided they didn't want to play Foursquare, the game with the ball. They were going to play tag at the end of the playground. And so they ran to the end of the playground, and they looked down at the ground, and there's these weird little footprints that were too small for a normal person. And they're looking at them, trying to figure it out, because it was clearly, bipedal, walking on two legs. And that's when they saw this light in the trees next to the playground or the field there. And their first thought was ice cream truck. They're little kids. And they're like, let's go. And, they're not supposed to leave the playground, but they couldn't resist. And so they ran into the trees. And they saw this light was actually a landed UFO. And there was an ET standing next to it.
Oh,
and
wow.
She said it looked weird. You may have heard of grays.
Yes.
This was not a gray. This was not a praying mantis or a human. This was different. I asked her what this thing looked like. And she said, well, there were 6 of us. We all stood in a row watching this thing. It was maybe 10 or 20 feet away, so very close. Had large, dark eyes, dark skin, was wearing a dark jumpsuit, had a largish head that was bald. But she said it was very muscular looking. I mean, it looked like a gymnast. It was wearing a jumpsuit, she thinks. And it had a face like a gorilla almost, is how she described it.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, I get lots of cases which are what I would call unique humanoids. I mean, I haven't heard anything before or since quite like it. And they're watching this thing, and it's back, it's staring right at them, right in the eyes. And they're staring back. No one's really scared. They're just kind of in awe. And this thing is backing up towards this craft, which is, fairly large. It's like a small house, dome-shaped. It's got a light on top, little landing legs. She didn't remember any portholes or other lights, but it was silver. And it's backing up, going towards it. And is about to go inside, she thinks, when the teacher, Mrs. Ohlendorf was her name, comes running up from behind them and screams, gets completely hysterical, grabs the kids and says, go inside now, and gathers them all. And by this point, all the kids in the playground are seeing this thing. So they're freaking out.
Wow.
She pushes everyone back inside, orders them all inside, which they do, and they all rush to the windows of the classroom, which overlooks this field, and they can still see it. And she starts shutting all the blinds, trying to get the kids from not seeing it. I don't know why. I think this would be an interesting learning lesson.
Absolutely.
Right? But a really interesting case. And what ended up happening is she called the other teachers, she called the principal. They shut school down. They said, and sent kids home on the bus, put them on the gymnasium. One kid shouts out, there it goes, because there were windows, high up, but you could see. And that was it. And it was the buzz of the school for months. And anytime anyone talked about it, teachers would go, "Stop talking about it."
Oh wow! Did they receive a message or anything? Did they get a, how they get messages every once in a while? Like the Zimbabwe case, I think they told them that to take care of the Earth, or the Earth was going to be destroyed if they didn't take care of it, or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, several kids got messages. Not in this case, not that they remember or are aware of. And there's a lot of these types of cases, and there were a few, but not quite as extensive as the Zimbabwe case. I know there's a case in Colombia, which occurred in the same year as the Zimbabwe case, and was essentially the same. In the elementary school, UFO lands next to this playground, as they always do, and ETs got out and gave messages that were along those lines. I didn't investigate that case personally, so I can't really say for sure. It's kind of a secondhand case, but I know the guy who talked to the teacher.
Wow.
So, yeah, a lot of cases of this kind.
I like how you started investigating the schoolyard thing. That's fascinating, man. That's awesome, and that you found a bunch of them. Wow.
Yeah, I've been in this field for decades at this point. This is something relatively recent that I found out. I just put together a book maybe a year or two ago, and I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, who would even thought? You don't ever hardly hear about it, but people wouldn't talk about it, for years and years and years. When you first started investigating this in the 80s, did you have a lot of trouble having people open up to you because of the ridicule and of coming forward?
Yeah, I sure did. And that includes my family members. Boy, was I mad. I'm like, what? How come you didn't tell me you saw a UFO? My brother did, actually, but I wouldn't listen to him. I didn't believe. So I told him to just shut up. But after I heard this report on the news, I asked him, Mark, what happened? And he was freely disgusted. And so did his friends who were there. But my sister-in-law, she had seen UFOs. She never told me. People at work, they didn't talk about. Like, why didn't you guys tell me? I was mad, a little mad, and they said
they had everybody embarrassed to discuss things like that because, they put it in their head that you're crazy if you've seen something like that, or you talk about it, or and that's sad, man. That's a real disservice to the truth, the truth that's out there that these people are seeing.
I agree, because that's why I didn't even bother thinking that this was even real, because I thought they were all hoaxes, hallucinations, and misperceptions. That's what I honestly thought. People were lying or on drugs or something. But I was wrong. I will freely admit I was wrong. And yeah, people were very reluctant, especially if they had missing time or were taken on board or saw an ET. And almost every time I interviewed someone who had a major encounter, they would say something like, "I'm not crazy," or "I've got a good job. I have no history of mental illness in my family. I haven't told anybody. My wife doesn't know. Please don't use my name. I could lose my job." And I know people who have lost their jobs. One lady I interviewed.
That's why I'm anonymous here. You don't see me I'm Ghost Lee Hunter, so they don't see my face because I work with the public, and I'm afraid because I've seen things as well, and it's just I don't want to lose my job because I work with the public. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. One lady I interviewed who had somebody with her when a UFO showed up, and she ended up seeing humanoids. Well, she had just had a baby, and her parents ended up committing her in a mental institution and took her baby away from her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and she had a witness with her. She had another witness, and they did not care. They said, if you believe in UFOs, you're crazy.
Just an excuse. An excuse to get them.
Yeah.
Hey, Preston. I'm sorry, Lee. Go ahead.
No, that's right. Go ahead, David.
I'm just interested if me being from Texas, if he's familiar with the Stephenville sighting and what went on down there.
Yeah, that was a major wave, really well authenticated. We have these major waves every 5 or 10 years or so, and that was one of the last really major ones that it's got so many witnesses. You can't cover
Oh
it
yeah,
up.
it really did.
Yeah, police officers, military witnesses. The Air Force lied about it. Oh, it's just, we know nothing about it. That was their first line. Then the second was, well, we did have Air Force jets, and they were just afterburners that people were looking at.
Mm-hmm. I remember people saying the maneuvers were just out of this world. It was almost toying with the F-16s in the air before it kind of zoomed away.
One guy said he had Air Force officials show up and actually threaten him.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people saw this, and it was amazing. That case in particular has some absolutely irrefutable evidence in that there were weather stations that tracked this on radar, and investigators were able to obtain these radar reports and tracked this UFO, its movement, which, like you said, was crazy maneuvers, super fast, stopping, darting, hovering.
Yeah, like zigzagging all over the place, stopping and starting.
Yep, and the eyewitness reports matched the radar reports. It was heading off towards Crawford, towards Bush's, George Bush's ranch, is where it was heading towards. Makes me wonder about that, but yeah, it's a great case.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the first one that got me kind of into it because it was so close to home.
Yeah, Texas is, I think, number 3 in the U.S., number 4. a lot of reports in Texas. It's a big state. True.
Yes, sir.
Do you think Lockheed Martin has anything to do with that? Some of the sightings, Preston?
Possibly, and in a couple of ways, because I do think that ETs are very interested in our technology. I mean, we kind of know this. They're hovering over Air Force bases, power stations, nuclear sites, anything of any technology, they will visit it. But at the same time, we also know that our military is reverse engineering this technology from UFO crashes like Roswell and many others. I've talked to some whistleblowers myself. So some of what people are seeing is not ETs. It is us.
I have I kind of have a theory about the moon landing, and I know that people will probably think this is stupid or off the wall, but I think that if they did go to the moon, I don't think they went in the technology that I've seen in the museums. I think they probably went and reverse engineered technology that was, acquired at Roswell, because they would have had from 47 up to whenever the moon landing was to reverse it and to try to, make that type of technology. And why is NASA now saying we've lost that technology? We don't have that technology now, so we can't go back to the moon. That don't make sense.
Yeah, they said they actually lost some of the films that were taken. I'm like, really? You lost it? It's just not credible to me. But I do think we went to the moon. So many people were involved. They tracked this. Amateurs were tracking on their telescopes. I will say a lot of whistleblowers, insiders at NASA, like Maurice Chatelain and a bunch of them, Chris Kraft, said that the Apollo and Gemini missions were basically followed to and from the moon. And I think we probably found some stuff up there.
I totally agree with you.
There's parts of it are being covered up because they haven't released. They supposedly took many pounds of moon rocks, and they haven't released them. I'm thinking some of the materials they took were not rocks at all.
Probably artifacts.
Yeah, and if you look into the whole history of the moon, because I just kind of ignored all those rumors for a long time until I interviewed this guy who was a photographer in the Navy, who was on a ship that picked up the astronauts and spoke with them. And he said it was all they said it was a whitewash. They were shocked at what they found. He said he developed photographs that they took, which showed basically the structures on the moon. And I'm interviewing this guy, and he's legit. He had credentials. So I ended up researching. I'm like, oh my gosh, there are a number of reports, and there's a history of strange lights seen on the moon going back to the 1600s. The first guy, astronomer Herschel, who got a telescope, saw lights on the moon. This is scientifically verified. They're called TLP, transient lunar phenomena, lights on the moon, and they don't know what they are. And they're not natural because they will show up in like a perfect line or a cross, or they'll be regular. And there are over 1,000 reports of this. This is verified scientifically. It's not speculation. Something's going on up there.
Absolutely. Do you think there is a secret space program, like Solar Warden, possibly?
I suspect that there is. I cannot say I've specialized in this, and I can't say I have any real firsthand reports on this. I'm following the reporting that's going on it, and there's quite a bit of whistleblower accounts, like Gary McKinnon. I don't know if you remember him.
Yes.
I thought what he found from hacking the computers was pretty interesting.
They sure wanted him over here awful bad, didn't they?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, and that was just sort of the real big break in the case, which sort of led towards all of this. It's a logical, I think, conclusion to say that something like that is going on. But again, that's not something I can really speak to with any authority, other than to say that, yeah, I think so. I followed the researchers who are digging into this. I did interview one guy who was a subcontractor and worked at Edwards Air Force Base and saw a UFO in a hangar. And his employer's like, shut up, don't talk about it. I can't tell you. Don't ever ask me what it is. But years later, the same employer said, I need you for another job. And the guy I interviewed, who was on his deathbed in a hospital when I interviewed him, really wanted to get this out before he died. And the employer said, fine, I will tell you, but you can't tell anyone. And he said, what you saw was not a UFO, but it was reverse engineered from alien technology. It's an operating craft which uses the theory or the mechanics of counter-rotating magnets to create a magnetic field, which pushes the craft in the desired direction. So, yeah, we probably have some of this stuff, and I would absolutely expect that we are doing all kinds of stuff that we're not being informed about.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd totally agree with that. I got a story for you. I don't know if you've got time to listen to this, but a guy that I worked with, he was an anesthesiologist, and he liked to go to a gun range and shoot guns. And he was at this gun range this particular day, and he met an old man that was a World War II vet, and he basically told this guy, he said he was at Roswell when they retrieved that crash, and he said they went back to the base, and he said him and his buddy got up, they climbed up on the barrack roofs or whatever, wherever they took it to, and he said they were watching them mess with this thing, and he said that they would lift this thing up off the ground, and he said it would zip down the field, and then it'd zip back, and then it'd sit down, and then it'd go back up, and it'd zip down and zip back. And he said they watched him do it for a while, and he said all of a sudden these buses come in, and these guys got off these buses and loaded everybody up on that base and told them that they weren't to talk about it, and just to keep their mouths shut or they'd get in trouble. But I thought you might find that interesting.
Oh yeah, very. I love the Roswell case, because I think it's the most famous case in the world, the one with the most potential to break this wide open, this field. And what I love about it is, there's got to be 50 books on this case. Not kidding, 50, and researchers have interviewed, I think it's 300, 400, 500 people. And that includes people who saw this thing crash. That includes people who saw it on radar, people who were there at the crash site, people who guarded it, people who shipped this wreckage to the base, people who saw the bodies, people who shipped the wreckage to various Air Force bases, people who studied it at, Wright-Patterson or what have you. So, I mean, people on every, aspect of this case have been interviewed. And you're telling me another guy who was involved. It's amazing to me. This is the case that.
Yeah, he said him and his buddy were watching it, and they seen those buses come in, and them start loading them up, and they slid off the back of the roof. Now, I don't know if they got caught. I'm sure they got caught by him when they got on the ground, but yeah, he said they were messing with that. I don't know what they were doing with it or who was messing with it, but he said it'd go up in the air a little bit, and then they'd zip down the field and zip back. And my friend, he swore up and down it was a true story that he told me. So he was excited when he was telling me. So
that's really interesting. I haven't heard that aspect of it, but yeah, we keep getting new information. It's the case that keeps on giving.
Yeah. Have you heard that disclosures? I've heard that disclosure is going to be in 2047, 100 years after Roswell. Have you heard that?
I have, and I'm not sure I entirely believe that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I mean, it's clear there is sort of, it's very tightly controlled. That much is clear. And that there has been steps towards disclosure, bit by bit, drop by drop. And I'm not sure we're ever fully going to get everything that government knows about this.
No,
but we're getting some movement recently, so that's very interesting. And
you mean like the tic tac that they're showing on the ships? Ship cameras,
which is nice, I'm really interested in seeing this and glad that they're doing it. But we've all seen better footage than that. I mean,
absolutely.
It's cool that they're verifying it and say, well, we don't know what this is. We think it might be Russian or Chinese. I'm like, well, no. I think that this is none of those. This is probably extraterrestrial, and they did actually use the word extraterrestrial.
Did they?
Yep, in their 7-page report on this, 144 cases that they studied. So we'll see.
What do you think about the Nazis and the Hanabu, like the Hanabu 1 and Hanabu 2 and all those crafts that they supposedly had? Is there some weight behind that? Or is that just fantasy?
I don't know. That's another aspect that I haven't done a whole lot of research on, because there are researchers who specialize in just that. But apparently there's some really good reporting on the Nazis having recovered some materials of some kind and reverse engineering it. And that's when the war, ended. That's why we had a lot of them being, farmed over into the U.S. and used to help study this subject. I suspect there's something to it. I think there's probably a lot of disinformation on this as well, because I don't know, some of the stories are so crazy and outlandish.
Yeah.
I just don't know what to think. But yeah, I suspect that they, the Germans did have some knowledge and possibly some actual hardware, perhaps a crash craft. This is what some of the researchers who have specialized in this are saying. Can't say for sure. I don't know, but it sure is interesting.
What's your take on the Valiant Thor? That incident with Valiant Thor and Frankie Stranges, Dr. Frankie Stranges. Have you dove into any of that much?
A little bit. I actually did talk to Frank Stranges. It was amazing, because when I got involved in this field, a lot of the researchers weren't very welcoming. It was a very kind of tightly close-knit group, and people were very political and protective of their information. And I met him, and he was the nicest guy. Just a really sweet man and very sincere and kind. And I think probably, there's pretty good evidence in the form of multiple eyewitness testimonies that there were incidents in which ETs did interact to some degree with highly placed government leaders. And that fits right in there. I also talked to Craig Campobasso, who was pretty much Frank Strange's liaison and protege, and ended up, doing follow-up research on his story. I think there's probably something to it. This field is easy to go down a rabbit hole, and this information is very hard to verify, but no one's been able to debunk that story. So I think there's probably something to it. But honestly, I specialize mostly in talking to people who've had encounters.
Awesome.
And there's so many levels to all of this that I try to keep up with it. There's people Ted Phillips, he specializes in landing trace cases. Love his research, but I'm not an expert on that either. I'm not a photographic expert, but the photographic cases are incredible. And the radar returns and the medical evidence. That's one area I did do a lot of research on, was people who've had physiological improvements, healings.
We have a buddy. We have a buddy who was on a couple episodes back that we met over from the UK, and he has a triangular shaped scar where he had a mole, and he swears up and down it was removed by, he thinks extraterrestrials removed it. He woke up and it was like that, and he couldn't explain it. But we got pictures of it and everything, and it's whoever did it did a good job. I can tell you that.
Sure did.
Yeah, I know a couple of cases just like that. Moles.
Triangle-shaped incisions. Was it any triangle-shaped incisions?
Not in the cases where the moles were removed, but yeah, triangles very common. I talked to one guy who was in special forces as a mechanic, and was actually got awards, their whole team. And he had just retired. He was in his home in Kankakee, Illinois. And he's a twin. His twin brother had a major encounter. And he, believed his brother, but he saw a UFO once. It was 1994. He wakes up and there's grays surrounding his bed. And he's like, oh, look at you. And he recognized him just from TV and, the drawings people have done. And they said, don't be afraid. We won't hurt you. Get up. We want you to follow us. And he did. And there's this craft hovering over his backyard. They pulled him through the wall. It was like a hole had just opened up in his living room. And he said it was a beautiful craft, colored lights. He pulled up inside of it. They're laying him out on this table, and instruments are coming down towards him. And he had no fear up until that point when something started coming towards him. That looked sort of like a laser or a needle or something. And he blacked out and woke up shortly later in bed and jumped out of bed, and there was a triangle on his arm. It was on the inside of his elbow. Very obvious. Talked to a lot of people who've had this sort of thing, but I liked his case. Kim Cannon was his name. And because he's a military guy, a good observer, trained observer.
Absolutely.
He called his wife, who was working at the hospital. He's like, oh my God, Grays came and abducted me. She's like, really? She's like, I'm not kidding. Come home. She's like, I can't. I'm at work. I'll be home in a couple of hours. And the next day, I think it was, he went to the VA, the hospital, and talked to a doctor who said, examined it and said, well, this is clearly not psychosomatic. The doctor did not seem the least bit surprised. Kim told the whole story, and the doctor didn't blink, didn't blink an eye, didn't raise an eyebrow. Just said, yep, this looks real to me. You can either accept this and move on, or you can, fret about it and freak out. I suggest you just accept it and move on. These things happen. And that's what he did. But it was amazing to me that this doctor who works for the military is like, oh, yeah, there you go. Mark from a UFO. Didn't surprise him in the bit.
Hey, Preston, do you think there's a relation to these cryptid sightings as well? Or are they related to some of these UFO sightings? What's your whole outtake on that?
Yeah, I think in some cases, and that was something I was really resisted researching. But very early on, it became clear to me there was a paranormal aspect to all of this, because a lot of people that I was talking to described having a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, or their ghost-like activity, or precognition, or past lives, or it just started to go crazy. So I started researching all of that, and then this guy from Canyon Country here in Southern California calls me up. He's like, a UFO landed in my backyard. He's a radiologist, a pretty educated guy, and described this object that had landed in his backyard. He said, "That's not the end of the story. It took off. It was a pretty quick thing." Next night, he says, a Bigfoot showed up. I'm like, Bigfoot? What? He's like, honest to God, and he said he felt like he had telepathic contact with it. His dogs were going crazy. It left footprints. And following that, he had a poltergeist outbreak in his house. So that was my first kind of introduction to there being a connection to this. And I ended up getting another case and then another. I'm like, oh, okay, fine, let's investigate Bigfoot. And Bigfoot is absolutely real. I can tell you confidently that it is.
No doubt.
Most of the people I've interviewed don't see a UFO with Bigfoot, and vice versa. Most people have a UFO encounter. There's no Bigfoot, but there's 50 or 100 cases where it's intersects perfectly. People are seeing a Bigfoot coming out of a UFO, or going in, or there at the same time. So yes, there's a connection. I can't quite figure it out. I'm thinking
another rabbit hole.
Yeah, I don't know. Are these ETs Bigfoot? I don't think so. Maybe they're in contact with ETs the same way we are. I think some of these Bigfoot are probably intelligent, but I ended up doing a lot of cryptozoological research and got a few dogman cases, couple, some ghost dogs. Found out that there were reports of people seeing pterodactyls. I'm like, oh, really? Pterodactyls? I still don't know if I entirely can buy into that. But the reports are pretty compelling. There is, the whole chupacabra was relatively new. That's not really any historical precedent for that. So cryptozoology is fascinating. I know sea serpents for sure are real. The reporting on that is absolutely conclusive.
Someone in the chat said pterodactyl thunderbirds. I agree.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people are probably seeing those thunderbirds and they think pterodactyl right off the bat.
Yeah, I did talk to someone in my family who said he saw one, but he would only talk about it when I got him. My brother, I should say, he's now passed, but he never told anybody except me, and only told me after he got drunk one day, because I would always hound him, like I did all my family members. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and I would always say, UFOs are real. This stuff is real. And he's like, no, it's not. And I'm like, yes, it is, and I can prove it. And finally, I turned them all around, and I got him to realizing there's truth to this. And he said, yes, he's had a ghost encounter, and he saw what he thought was a thunderbird. I'm like, you're kidding. He says, no, this thing was as big as a plane. I don't tell people, they're not going to believe me, so I'm not going to talk about it. But
wow.
He said its wingspan was well over 50 feet. It was huge. So I don't know.
Scary to think about.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I got a quick story. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to believe him because he absolutely would not talk about it. He had no interest in publicity, didn't want people to know. So how, why would you lie if you don't even want to tell anybody it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes. I got a story for you, a quick story. My grandfather, what got me interested in this whole paranormal thing is when I was a kid, I heard a story about my grandfather that he had said he had contact with a man that claimed that he was from Venus, and it would have been around the time Frankie Strange's would have met Valiant Thor. It would have been around that time frame, and like late 50s, early 60s, I'm guessing. And he worked a night shift with this guy, and somehow they got to talking about space and stuff. And my grandfather asked a question. He said, "Do you think that there's life elsewhere out there in the universe?" And this guy told him. He said basically, he said, "Yeah." He said, "There is life out there." And he said, "You're not going to believe me, but," he said, "I'm not from here." He said, I'm from Venus." And so my grandfather's thinking, he's thinking, yeah, right, thinking this guy's crazy. And so they get to talking and this and that, and he told my grandfather, basically, he said they lived on the interior of the planet, and that he could take my grandfather there, and my grandfather could live with him for 10 years, and he told my grandfather that he would be so intelligent when he come back that the most intelligent person here on the earth would seem to have the intelligence of a monkey to him, basically, is what he told him. And so he asked my grandfather to take him home one night, and so my grandfather said, "Yeah, I'll take you home." And so he starts to take this guy home. And back then, I guess the roads were like what they call washboard roads, and the suspension was really rough on the cars. And they're driving down the road, and the car's just beating them to death. And then all of a sudden, the car smooths out, and the guy looks at my grandfather and says, "Do you notice anything different about the road?" My grandfather says, "Yes." And the guy basically tells him that he is using his mind to lift the car up enough that it doesn't cause the bump, doesn't cause him to hit the bumps and, rattle him to death, basically. So anyway, my grandfather takes him home, and then he goes back. He's talking to him again at work, and the guy asked him, he said, "Would you like to go up there and live with us for 10 years? And my grandfather said, "I can't, because I've got children I've got to take care of. I would absolutely love to, but I can't." And so he asked my grandfather, he says, "If I could arrange it for you to go anywhere in the solar system, where would you like to go? Any planet, where would you like to go?" And my grandfather basically told him, he said he'd watched, I forget if it was Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon. It was one of them, like back in the 20s or 30s when he was a younger man. And he said he'd like to go to Mars. And so that guy told him, he says, "Well, if I could arrange it, will you go?" And he said yes. And so my grandfather goes and picks him up. He told him when to pick him up or whatever. He picks him up, takes him out in the country, and before that, I got to tell you, the guy asked my grandfather, he said, "Is there any way that you could hook me up with a woman?" He said, "I've never been with a woman before, because we don't, do that kind of thing on our planet." And so my grandfather said yes. Well, my grandfather takes him to the, I guess you could call it a brothel or red light district or whatever. And they go in this house, and this guy, he picks this woman out, and they go upstairs, and my grandfather said they wasn't there maybe 5-10 minutes upstairs, and he said, and then here he comes back downstairs, and the woman's just like shaking her head in disbelief. And my grandfather didn't ask him what happened at the time, because he said back then it wasn't appropriate to ask people that kind of stuff, personal questions like that, which it wouldn't be today either. But so they leave, and then, like I said, he arranged for him to go off planet. And so my grandfather takes him out, and he tells my grandfather where to go, where to drive. So they go out in the country, and he tells him turn by this woods, and so there's this lane heading back to this woods, and he said they get back in this lane where this woods was at, and he said there was a little field inside the woods, and he said sitting in the middle of that field was a silver disc. He described it as a silver disc craft with a landing thing down. They got out, they boarded, they got on board the craft. My grandfather said there was 2 or 3 others inside the craft. And he said if you saw them, they just looked just like us. You wouldn't be able to tell them any difference between us and them. And so I guess they seatbelt him in or do whatever, they, sit him down, and the door closes and they start lifting up off the ground. And my grandfather said they went out of the atmosphere, and he said he could see the earth, and he said the earth just looked like a beautiful blue ball like you see. And my grandfather says they jumped from earth to the atmosphere of Mars and are starting to come down in the atmosphere of Mars. And the occupants of the ship told my grandfather, they said, we're gonna take you down here on the surface, and they said we're gonna get out, and then they said we're gonna show you that there's life up here on Mars. And so, but they told him, they said, but in no way, shape, or form are we to make contact with these beings. And so they get out, I guess, out of the craft, and I did not ask. I should have asked if they wore some kind of apparatus. I didn't ask if they wore any breathing apparatus or anything. But he said they got out. He said they walked by these boulders, and these great big old boulders, and he said they had him peek around the corner and watch, and he said these beings come up out of the ground, and like out of caves or whatever, out of the ground. And I asked my grandfather, I said, well, what did these beings look like? And my grandfather said what they looked like. He said they were humanoid looking, but he said they were covered in hair from head to toe, and he said what they looked like were what we describe here on the earth as a Bigfoot. And so my grandfather sees this, and he gets so super excited that he can't contain himself. Like he's just like the adrenaline's going, and he just cannot contain himself. And he's like thinking it. And what he said was, he was thinking in his mind, oh my God, here I am from Earth. I'm on Mars. I can't believe this. There's these beings there. And he disobeyed what they told him and said, and he went around the boulder and tried to make contact. And he said when he went around that boulder, and he tried to say, hey, we're here. Like he said, he was face to face with one of those creatures that come up out of the ground. And he said, as soon as he was face to face with this thing, it was like he was zapped and he blacked out. And he said the next thing he knows, he's landing halfway on his bed, half on, half off, and he's fully dressed. Like somebody picked him up and just threw him on his bed at his house. So he goes back to work after this, and the guy's gone. And it's like nobody knows who this guy is, or, it's almost like he didn't exist. And so my grandfather got to thinking he had taken this guy to that brothel or whatever, and he thought, well, because thought he was going crazy at the time. So he goes to this brothel, and he finds the woman that this guy picked out and went up in the room with, and he asked that woman, he said, do you remember such and such when I came here and I was with this gentleman? And she said, yeah. She said, I remember that. And he said, well, do you mind if I ask what happened? Because he said, when you guys come down, you were just like shaking your head in disbelief. And this woman proceeds to tell my grandfather that when they got up in the room, he paid the money and everything, but he didn't want to do anything with her. Only thing he did was interview this woman about anatomy and why she did what she did, and basically I should say the ins and outs of what she did. But anyway, that's basically the story. And so, but I heard that story. I heard it 2 or 3 times from the time I was 12 or 13 up until I was 19, 20, and the details never changed. And I just happened to, I didn't even know who Frankie Stranges was at the time when I had heard the story. And then later on, I was watching a show, and then this segment came on about Dr. Frankie Stranges, and he's talking about Valiant Thor and all these things that they could do, like use their mind to move, basically make things happen with their mind. And they said one, I think on that Frankie Strange's interview, he said something about their cloud cover up there and Venus was synthetic. And this guy had told my grandfather that they had created that cloud cover, but they didn't live on the outside. They lived on the interior of the planet. So I know it sounds too good to be true, but I honestly believe my grandfather, because I used to like sci-fi stuff when I was a little kid. At like Logan's Run, I used to like to watch Logan's Run or Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, and I would go to my great grandmother's house, which would have been his mom and dad's, and they would not let me watch sci-fi. They forbid me to watch anything sci-fi, and I didn't know until later on that they told him to shut up and not talk about that story anymore, because they thought he was crazy or nuts, and he would start crying because he knew, because to him that was real to him, and he was suffering from ridicule. But when he found out that I was interested in it, man, he was just like an open book, man. He just like opened up and talked to me, because I didn't judge him I didn't have any judgment. But that is one fascinating story that I've heard about Venusian, and it's the second one that I'd heard in my life after I heard Dr. Frankie Strange's. So,
well,
sorry to bore you with that.
No, it's very, very interesting. I don't know quite what to make of it, because we're pretty sure Venus is, a toxic atmosphere, unless it's complete lies through and through that NASA's telling us, which I suppose is possible, but I don't know.
I asked, I'm sorry. I asked my dad when he was little, because my dad remembered when that was all going on. I asked my dad, I said, when you were little, I said, did you ever see anything like that? And he said, yes. He said, my grandfather took him and the family out into the country, and I presume to show him where it happened to him. And my dad said they saw this silver disc craft come up out of the woods, and it turned on edge, and then my dad said that thing shot straight up just like a bullet, and he said it was gone just in a split second, just gone. But he said he witnessed that when he was a kid. So
yeah, I know that ETs will sometimes say we're from Venus or Mars when they're not, and it's just sort of a way of saying, we don't want to reveal our location.
Yeah, I'd heard that too as well.
So perhaps. I don't know. I haven't heard a story quite like that. That's very interesting.
Appreciate it.
The fact that you heard it firsthand, I think, is awesome.
Oh yeah. I part of me believes what he said, and my mom and dad, they believed what he said. And here's the thing about him: he wasn't somebody that was like into the sci-fi as I remember, other than the Buck Rogers he talked about when he was younger, because later on in life what he did was he was a race car driver, and he liked sports. We go over there, he'd be watching golf and basketball and football, anything sports. So he was that was his passion, was sports and stuff. The other, was something that he probably just looked at on the side, but he never ever one time talked about anything like that until I heard that story. My dad told me, and I mentioned it to him, and then he just opened up like an open book. So whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I've seen some things in my life that I know that was real, and I don't know what they were, but they are out there. So
yeah, that's nothing like personal experience.
Yes.
To really convince a person. I can see why some people they're going to be skeptical until they see it themselves.
Absolutely.
We have enough proof in the public arena to say there's absolutely something to this. But yeah, that I haven't heard a story like that. That is crazy. That's amazing.
Yeah. You ever seen the movie Close Encounters of the, with Richard Dreyfuss?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know the part in the movie where he's sitting, he's like sitting on the railroad track, and they say, "Well, where are you?" That was supposed to have been filmed. It wasn't filmed in Muncie, all of it, but it was supposed to take place in Muncie, Indiana, and that's where I'm from, and my grandfather and him was from. But anyway, when he's sitting at that railroad track, he says, they say, where are you at right now? And that's when the mailboxes start moving and the UFO comes up behind him. And on the radio, you can hear him say, I'm sitting here on Cornbread Road. And that Cornbread Road is where my grandfather would have lived when that happened to him. And that's where my dad grew up, was on Cornbread Road. So that's an actual real road in Muncie in that movie.
Wow.
So.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've gotten a couple of cases from Indiana, by the way.
Have you?
Oh yeah, I mean there are cases all across the world and U.S. and everywhere. But one lady I interviewed lives in Indiana. I forget. She told me the town. It was a small town, but I think it was. At any rate, she had taken her son to the dentist, and the dentist freaked out because there was like something under his tooth that was the size of like a marble almost, and it looked metallic according to the X-rays, and it freaked him out. She sent me the X-rays, and it turned out the son had seen a UFO. It came swooping down at him. I think it's probably an alien implant. I can't prove it, but it's quite an extensive case, and took place in Indiana. Yep.
I just talked to last. Let me think here. Was it last? No, it'd been 2 years. 2 years ago now. We went to a place in town, and there was a farmer there that they own one of the largest cattle farms down here. I shouldn't probably said that because now they can find out who he is. But anyway, he was telling me that him and his sons were out combining at 1:30 in the morning and combining beans, and he said these things come out of the sky. They come swooping down on them, and he said these things were circled their combine and shot lights into the combine, and then he said they'd shoot back up in the air and then zip off, and then they'd come back and they would dive in on them and then hover and then go around them in a circle and shine the lights in a combine. And these guys thought that maybe somebody, maybe it was a military drone or something military, and they get pissed off, so they try to get to their vehicles and try to run these things down. But they said they could not, they couldn't keep up with it. And they said it just zip off so fast they couldn't keep up with it. And then I had another report just about 6 miles from where I live here. They live about 8 miles away from where I'm at right here. But then I have another report about 6 miles away of a craft coming down and chasing these people in a car. And they finally got in their driveway and then running the house. But it scared them to death. And that happened about a year ago, I think now. We're getting close to about a year. And that was just up the road here.
Amazing. Can you imagine how many cases we just never hear about? If these are the ones we're uncovering, this must be much more common than we're hearing.
I think about that all the time too.
Go ahead, Preston.
I know places like MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and NUFORC, National UFO Reporting Center, receive like a dozen cases daily. And I've always asked people, when I interview them, did you report your sighting to the police, to the Air Force, to MUFON? They're like, MUFON? What's MUFON? Most people don't report. 1 in 100 maybe. So
I tried to report to MUFON one time, but it was back before I had cell phones, and I was seeing UFOs almost on a nightly basis where I used to live at, and I even had my family even saw them, my neighbors saw them, the people in town were seeing them, and they were these orange balls of light that they would come together, that looked like they would join and go inside of each other. Then they would go out, and then they would appear over in another direction, and then one would come out of another one, like it looked like one coming out of it, but they were these orange. They looked like balls of light, but orange balls of light, but they were big because you could see them off in the distance. And my buddy lived behind me in a house way up on top of this big hill where you could see over town. And he was out one night, and I told him, I said, look, I said, those lights are out here. I said, he was a Vietnam vet, so he'd been in special forces, and he was a sniper. And I specifically asked him, I said, are those flares? Because that's what you would think of seeing these things, that these would be military flares. So he's observing them, and he's watching them with me, and he looked at me. I said, are those flares? And he said, no. He said, those aren't flares. He said, flares go down. They don't go up. and these things were going up and then to the sides, right and left, and they made a triangle at one time. They made like a pyramid shape. And but anyway, I would be sitting at the house, and I would just get this feeling like those lights are out there, and I would walk outside, and there they'd be. They'd be over in the horizon. But I did that so many times, and I had people that be with me, and I'd say, "I bet those lights are out there," and I'd go out there, and they'd be there. But I tried to call MUFON. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. I never could raise anybody and get a hold of anybody back then. But I tried. I tried for a couple years, but it was happening on a nightly basis. And I would talk to people in town, and I'd say, "Do you guys ever see those lights over in the sky? Those orange balls of light?" And they'd say, "Yeah." They say, "What are they?" They'd ask me. They say, "Well, what are those things? We see them all the time." And nobody had an answer. But here about a month ago, I just dug up some footage from the 70s of these. It's an old news report, and it's out of Bloomfield, Indiana, and that's close to where I was seeing these. And these people were reporting these balls of light back in the 70s. And they described, and the lady said she even seen it, that was reporting it. She described seeing these orange balls of light, and that they would appear, and they'd go out and then reappear. But have you had any? I'm sorry, I keep rambling off telling you.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting to me. You're like, oh, I bet they're out there, and you go out there, and they are, because they will. A lot of people have told me that they will sort of mentally call to people. And
I even had experience. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think they're showing themselves on purpose, honestly.
I actually had you talked about going through the wall, like this guy was pulled through the wall. I had one night I laid down in bed, and I hadn't, you don't lay down in bed and in a second fall asleep. But I laid down in bed, and it was like started to go out, and I could feel myself being pulled through the wall. And that was around the time I was seeing those lights. So I've seen a black cloaked figure come to the window, and that was another thing I was going to ask you. Have you had any reports of 3 to 4 foot tall black cloaked figures that float off the ground?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that often will happen after someone sees UFOs, particularly if it's at all close.
I was face to face
themselves, I think.
I was face to face with this thing. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I lived here where I'm at now, but it was at a different apartment. And I stay up late, it was about 1:30 in the morning, and I go in to sit on the bed, and I've got a habit of turning the lights out off the back, outside lights or anywhere, because that's just how I was raised. And so I went to sit on the bed, and I looked out towards the bathroom, and I noticed the lights were on outside, and I said to myself, I said, "Well, you dumbass, did you just leave the back porch light on?" So I got up and I went in there to the bathroom, and there's a blind behind the toilet. So I went to flip that blind down, and when I flipped that blind down, that little cloaked figure was right up almost with its face on the glass. And when it saw that I could see it, Preston, that thing backed up off the window. It floated backwards off the window, and for you to be able to see into that window, somebody'd have to be 7-8 feet tall, because the foundation on the outside was pretty high, and then the window was on up. So this thing backs off the window, and I got such a good look at this thing. I couldn't see the face. I couldn't see hands or feet or anything like that. But this thing looked like, when I say cloak, it looked like what a monk would wear, but it was a black cloak, like what a monk would wear. And as it backed up off the window, the security lights were hitting this thing, and I could see the fabric on this, whatever this material was that this cloak was made out of, and it had a sheen to it like a silk. You know how silk kind of gives off a lights, sure, kind of. And it backs up, and it probably backed up maybe about, I don't know, about 8-10 feet, and it stops, and then it slowly turns to face the wood line, and I could see every ripple in the fabric, the whole 9 yards, as this thing is turning. But it was weird. It turned so smooth that it looked mechanical, if that makes sense. And this thing started to take off and go across the yard. And
Wow.
best way I could describe it, it looked like it was in a vacuum, if that makes sense. It just it started out kind of slow, heading towards the tree line, and the closer it got to the tree line, the faster it got. And as soon as it got to the tree line, it just kind of stopped, and then it just looked like something sucked it straight up in the air, just in a blink of an eye, just shot straight up in the air. Like somebody would grab a tissue paper and pull it out of the box real quick, just jerk it. And that's when I saw, when it started head across the backyard, is when I could see that it didn't have any legs, that it was floating. This being was floating above the ground. And about 2 days after that, I woke up. I had sleep paralysis, and I could move my eyes, but I couldn't move my body. And this black cloak figure was standing by my bed, right by my head.
Wow.
And I blacked out after that, so I don't know what happened. But
Yeah, that sounds kind of like a typical visitation to me. I've heard many similar accounts. I've heard the black hoods, the cloaks, all of that. So that doesn't surprise me one bit, really.
When I saw him, the first thing that came to my mind was, or when I saw it or whatever it was, the first thing that came to my mind was, they found me. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I don't know why I thought that. They found me. But that was after I'd had all that experience with seeing those lights and stuff. And I've had other stuff kind of like that happen to me, not seeing a being. That was the first time and last time I've seen, well, not last time I've had an experience with something like that. But I don't know what it was. And that's what I want. That's what I want answers. I want to know what that thing was. I want to know what it did to me when I was under that sleep paralysis and it was standing next to the bed. I don't know what it was doing, but that kind of makes you angry. Kind of makes you angry that something's got you under their spell or power or whatever, and they've invaded your house.
Yeah. So, hey, I can appreciate that.
I didn't tell anybody about this story for a long time, and it's hard to talk to. I mean, you just can't tell everybody about it because, do you know that story about Debbie Cawby? That's only probably about I'm guessing maybe an hour and 20 minutes from where I live, is where I think that happened.
Right. Yeah, I've spoken with her. Yeah, there's a lot of people having these experiences. And there's also, when someone has repeated sightings and they're seeing figures, and if your parents have seen it and your grandparents, this is definitely a sign of contact, because they do seem to sort of run in families to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. And it's unusual enough to see a UFO, and when someone sees it repeatedly, there are all different sorts of clues, sort of indications that a person is what I would call a contactee. And you're starting to click all the boxes there. Saying.
Preston, I'm sorry that I spilled all my stories to you, but I was just excited that maybe you had some answers and insight into that, and I really appreciate it, what you've told me about this. So.
Yeah, and I will say it's not something I don't think it's a nefarious phenomena. I don't think they're here to hurt us or scare us, or that's not their agenda at all. Mm-hmm. Overall, I think it's, we don't have anything to worry about after researching this and talking to people who've really remembered what happened to them, being taken on board. I'm very encouraged by their reports. I think ultimately we're going to be just fine. I don't think they're here to take over or hurt us or anything like that.
I didn't get a really bad feeling off of it, and I wasn't afraid of it, if that makes sense. I don't know why. I mean, you would think something like that would traumatize you to see something face to face like that, but it never did. I know that sounds stupid, but
no.
I've had 3 encounters with what I think is different beings, but when I was younger and I was seeing those red balls of light, I had an experience in the woods while I was hunting, and then that's when and then when I was little, I had something happen to me. Something picked me up out of bed and dropped me on the floor, and there was a big bright flash of light and a boom like thunder. And it was weird because my dad was a Vietnam vet, and he would get up at night and he'd walk around looking out the windows like he's on patrol, like he's protecting the house. And when that happened and nobody was up, nobody didn't wake anybody up, it would have woke him up because he was a light sleeper. And I don't know why that happened, but
yeah. Well, I was going to ask actually if you had any experiences in childhood, because that's another thing that is that does happen. I was
probably
to people who have contact.
9 or 10 years old when that happened. Yeah.
Yep.
And we actually had like there was a flap like there around Muncie, and our whole neighborhood seen a UFO one time. And it was like they described it as looking like Christmas tree lights over this field behind our neighborhood. And I remember my cousin, she told me that she had a dream when she was little about a craft landing behind the house and her house behind the garage. And she said she could see my dad and her mom and dad and about everybody in the neighborhood being loaded on board this craft, and said they had like this conveyor belt thing, and they put them on it and they went inside the craft or whatever. And when she told me that, it was almost like a flashback, like I could see, it was like I had a flash memory of that happening. And
oh, wow.
And then my mom, or my uncle, which would be her dad, was standing on the back porch, and he saw a craft that come in, and it was zipping around doing zigzags, and it'd stop, and then it'd zip and do like a Z pattern and then take off. But yeah, that isn't that just conventional aircraft that can pull maneuvers like that. At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
And then my mom had a sighting. Her and my uncle had a sighting this last summer, or it was in April, not summer, it was in April. And it was a white, she described it as a white type of craft that was hovering above woods. And her and my uncle just happened to be going down the road, and they both looked over at the tree line at the same time and could see this thing. And my uncle looked at her and said, well, what is that? And my uncle's a big skeptic. Like, we tried to talk to him about this stuff, and he'd always make fun of us and this and that. And he saw it. And my mom said what this thing did was it like slowly turned. It was just hovering, and it slowly turned like it sensed that they were there. That's what the feeling that she got, that it was there. It felt like it knew they were there. And this thing slowly turned, and she said the rear end of it dropped down, and she said it just disappeared. Like I don't know if it went into another dimension, took off, or did whatever, but she said it just disappeared. And it had an odd shape to it, like the back of it was like square, and she said it kind of tapered down to almost like a pyramid shape, but then had a square where the top of the pyramid would be, like a little square edge, and then the top of it, she said it looked like it had a cockpit on it. But she said that thing it looked like it was suspended in air, and the bottom of it just dropped down, and then it shot off. So my family has seen some stuff. So
yeah, but, sure sounds like it. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Would you look at a picture of a UFO that I took, Preston, and give me your take on it? I watched one here by my house in 2016. I watched it for an hour and 45 minutes. And I can screen share it here if you'd be interested in looking at it.
Yeah, sure. I'll take a look.
Let me see if I can do this, guys. Let's see here.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky to get a photo, because a lot of people try and the camera will fail, or they will dart away as soon as you whip the camera out.
Yeah, I actually. Hold on, guys. I actually watched it for an hour and 45 minutes. I tried to call MUFON again while I'm sitting out here watching it, and I got a hold of a guy that was he specialized in Roswell, and I described the color to him, but he didn't really have much to say about it. So let me see if I can get this up here for you guys. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna. Let's see. I don't know if you can see that good enough.
Yeah, I mean, are we looking at?
Yeah, let me click on it. See if I can make it larger. Is that any? Can you guys see that?
Yeah, I can see it. It's not super large, but so was this at daytime? Or
yeah, it was in the daytime. Yes.
Because the one is
right there.
The same picture.
Yeah, this is all. These are all the same craft. This one, I wanted you to see this one because I did the black and white and tried to bring out some detail on it. And if you look on the inside of it, it has like a, I don't know, it looks like an ear shaped thing, and I don't know if that's like a counterbalance or what, but I don't know what this thing is. Have you seen anything like that before, Preston? I'm just curious because.
I'm not a photo expert. I just want to preface that.
Correct.
But the fact that you're, willing to stand by this and say that you took this and able to describe it, I think lends a lot of credibility to it. It does not look like a balloon, airplane, or helicopter, or ball lightning, or anything like that. This looks like your standard sort of saucer-shaped craft. And people will describe various shapes to them. This looks like it has an undercarriage, kind of, like you described. I can't see the detail.
It's hard to get the detail on here. I mean, I can see pretty decent detail from sitting in front of the big screen here, but this is what I can tell you about it if you're interested. I'm gonna stop the screen share because takes bandwidth. Here's what I can describe to you about it. I looked at it with binoculars. The first time when I first saw it, I had been going outside for about a week looking up in the air because I felt like I was going to see something. And I just had this feeling, and so I go out. It was let me see, it was 4:00, and I watched it for an hour and 45 minutes. And I just happened to walk outside, and I look up, and when I first saw it, I thought to myself, "Oh, that's cool. It's a weather balloon. This is a weather balloon." And then I'm looking at it, and and then the thought comes to my mind, "No, this is no weather balloon." And then the hair stood up on the back of my neck, like I kind of got a little edgy. And so I'm watching it, and then I start scrambling back into the house, trying to get to the camera, because I thought, oh man, if I could get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe me if I don't get a picture of it. So I scrambled back in the house. I got the camera out. I used a Rebel XT camera that my wife had, and had a zoom lens on it. And I tried to steady it as close as I could on the as still as I could on the top of my Suzuki, and on the roof, and shoot the pictures. And I missed the money shot because there was a shot that I just missed it by seconds. There was an airplane that flew underneath this thing, so that would have give me a reference of scale and size and maybe altitude. And I saw a commercial jet fly above it, and then I seen this other jet fly below it, and
that should give you a rough idea of its altitude. What would you say?
I'm not really that good of a judge, tell you. I can tell you that the barn across the field is over 450 yards, and I'd say it was maybe about 800 yards up in the air, probably double that. And
all right. So the plane that flew under it, was this a small plane?
Yes, it was a small silver plane, and it was an odd shaped plane. But we've got a military base here. It's called Holman Airfield, and they fly airplanes in and out of there all the time. And so that was heading over there to land. So it was a little lower than what it would, what a commercial plane would be. Now the commercial jet that was above it was way, way above it. But
and was this object moving at all? I mean, you say it was hovering there,
motion. It was motionless. And the thing of it was, how like they show you the classic flying saucers, the silver disc or whatever, they're just like hovering, look like, like the classic UFO. This was not doing that. What this thing was doing, it was up on edge. Like it was up on the edge of its, you know what I mean? Like it was flipped up. And are you familiar with Dr. Wilhelm Reich?
Yeah, somewhat.
And the orgone?
Yeah.
Well, I had just made a cloudbuster. I'm giving it away. I made a cloudbuster, and I think this thing either came in and was scanning that energy or drawing energy off of it. I don't know what, but it was very interested in, I think, that the cloudbuster that I had built. And I know that's a kind of a sore topic to talk about. They don't like that kind of technology getting out, the orgone. But yeah, and I've got about 145, I think it was 145 pictures of this thing that I took because I was just snapping away. And there's one picture in particular that I've got where this thing is it looks like it's trying to create like a cloud around itself, but it couldn't get the job done. I don't know if that orgone knocked out its propulsion system or what, but it was like it was struggling. I mean, it didn't. It wasn't moving either. You know how like it wasn't wobbling, it wasn't going up or down or nothing. It was just like looked like it was just stuck there. And it took it about an hour to go from about the middle of the northern horizon to the east. Where the eastern horizon would start. It took it about an hour to cover that distance. And then it took it another 45 minutes to go about halfway. Like if I'm looking at it'd be the eastern horizon. It took it about 45 minutes to go about middle ways of the eastern horizon. And then the last time I saw it, it took off and it went about the speed of a jet. It slowly took off and then just picked up speed. And took off, and it headed to the south, in a southeastern direction, kind of like towards Louisville or in that,
And you said there was a military base nearby?
Yes, I actually showed it to the commander of the base. One of the ladies that I worked with, she was married to him, and he came to the thing, but he didn't know anything about it,
Wow.
But I didn't call the base or anybody like that to report it because I figured they already knew it was there. It was probably on radar, or they was possibly doing it. I thought maybe it could have been maybe some kind of a military drone. And I'll tell you, if that was a military drone, that was a fantastic, some fantastic technology because it didn't bob, weave, nothing. It just sat there in the air.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because generally UFOs do have sort of a wobble to them. People will describe it, they're wobbling slightly or bobbing up and down a little bit because they travel using gravitational waves, which are somewhat, unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's interesting. It definitely is. Obviously, I'm not a conventional aircraft of any kind.
No.
Looks metallic. So, yeah,
have you? And when I looked through at it with binoculars, I could see three like dome-looking protrusions on the bottom of it, and then around the edges, I could see what looks like, I don't know if they're windows or portholes, or like where rocket blasts would come out or what, but it looked like it was dotted all along the edge of it. And it was white. It was a white color, and it looked like it was. I don't know if you could say machined. It didn't even. I just looked like, I don't know. It was just a solid object. It looked like a solid object to me. I mean, it wasn't cloaking in and out or doing any funny stuff like that. I mean, it just stayed a solid object. Have you seen the footage of the flyover in Washington D.C. where the light, they look like, sorry, where they have the light craft are flying over Washington D.C. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think
it's in
so.
From the 50s, I think.
Oh yeah, sure. Yep.
I was over here where I saw this one that I just showed you. I was coming home from work, and our neighbors was going to have a cookout, and they invited me to it. And I was tired because I'd worked a 12-hour shift, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go to the cookout. So instead of going the way I normally would, I went around, tried to come in the back way so that I could, get in the driveway without being spotted, basically. And so I turned down the gravel road and over where I saw this picture that I took, the UFO. I'm coming up the road, and I get this thought comes into my head. You need to start looking up because you're gonna see something. And I get right down to the stop sign to turn towards my house, and right above the cow pasture, across the road in front of me, were these two lights that came down out of the clouds, and I call them light ships because they look like those craft that went over over Washington, and they hovered in the air. In the scale that I can give you is if you took your hand and you stuck your hand out in front of you, and you had a quarter, they would have been about the size of a quarter, maybe a 50-cent piece. And they were sitting up, and now these were pretty low. They were probably maybe about 400 yards up, and they were hovering there. And then all of a sudden, it was like they started going in a clockwise motion, like around each other. And as they did that clockwise motion, they backed straight up into the clouds and gone in a second, just like they were just being sucked straight back up into the clouds. But the message that I got with that one was, when I saw him, was basically what the message I got was, we're leaving and we're not coming back. So.
Oh wow.
And I haven't seen one since. So there you go.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like you're having some level of contact there. I mean, given all that you're telling me, with your relatives having encounters, you having stuff early on as a kid. Repeated encounters, close-up sightings, posing for a photograph, and telepathic, some communication there. Mm-hmm. All of this sort of adds up to,
That's what started my...
Lee, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Miss Dolly Saffron is in the chat and wanted me to let let Preston know.
Okay.
Oh. Awesome. Yes, I know Dolly. She's a contactee.
Awesome. Yeah,
awesome.
She's been putting some truth in here in the chat, and it's been awesome.
I'm sorry that I've been rambling on, Preston.
I know. Hey, this has been great, Lee. Everyone loves your stuff too, man. This is why we do it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the stories you're telling me, I'm like, yep. I've heard this before.
And I'm scared to admit it, Preston, because I had sleep paralysis when I was about 5 or 6, and now I'm starting to believe, something happened and I just don't remember it.
Yeah, it could be. Sleep paralysis is a real thing. That does happen, and that can be, dream related.
Oh, it was just, I just remember it being simply terrifying. It was so real. It's something you'll never forget.
Yeah, I've had it myself. And I think this does happen to people who are contactees, because they will sort of render you unable to move so you don't lash out. And it can be part of, being in their presence. And
mm-hmm.
So this is absolutely something that does happen to people who are having contact. But sleep paralysis is a separate phenomena. It's our skeptics who said, oh, you're just having sleep paralysis. No. Because sleep paralysis doesn't lift you up through the wall or throw you out of bed, or
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's in its own category, and doctors can't even explain what it is.
Yeah, it's part of contact, and but it's definitely, people try to debunk it, say, oh, it's just sleep paralysis. It doesn't hold water, because people who have contact will, have all kinds of other signs, telepathic communication.
Yeah, I just found it interesting. It never happened to me again. It was a couple times right off the bat around 5 years old, and then never again.
Preston, do some of the people that you've had, you've researched and talked to, that were having contact, did any of them ever mention anything about nosebleeds? Having, like, when they were young, did they have a lot of nosebleeds?
Yes, yeah, that is
because
another sign.
when I was younger, I had nosebleeds all the time. And another thing, when I was little, I never understood why, but praying mantis, I would freak out if I saw a praying mantis. Just the bug itself, just seeing that praying mantis, I would freak out. Now, I haven't ever seen a praying mantis being or anything, but people have having accounts of seeing them. But I don't know if that's anything to...
Yeah, it is. This may be buried in your subconscious, and maybe at some point there will be a trigger or a cue, and you'll start to remember more. Because I'm guessing that there probably is more to your story.
Yeah, there's some things,
dreams and stuff, or...
Actually, I've dreamed of different extraterrestrial races. I saw some that were... they had like a greenish colored skin to them, but they were humanoid looking, but they didn't have a nose like what we would think of as a nose. It was just more of a slit on their where their nose should have been, and their hair was white looking. And the craft landed in the driveway, and it looked like it was small. And I walked up to it, and a door opened up, and I went inside, and it had it was big. It was like it had like a laboratory in it, and then I could see the people sitting sitting behind consoles or whatever. And I walked up to one of these beings, and then basically what I told him was, if you're flying over by Japan, be careful because there's radiation coming out of Fukushima. So, but yeah,
that's
they were
interesting.
weird.
There's a couple of things that, again, I'm like, wow, because people will describe these things as being much bigger on the inside than they are on the outside. So, and there's definitely a thing about nuclear power with these guys. They're very, very concerned about it. It's a message that a lot of contactees get. So for you to mention this, I think it's probably some truth to what you're dreaming there, because sometimes people will remember what happened to them in their dreams. I'd suggest meditating on this, because that can also bring out new stuff. But the fact that you're doing this show, you've got a profound interest in it, is another clue.
Wow. So, well, and I want to help other people to get their message out, because of the ridicule that I've went through, and Dave's went through, and everybody that's had these experiences have went through. They shouldn't have to keep this stuff bottled up and be suppressed like that. If they've got something they need to get out, they need to get it out. I think anyway. Yeah,
I totally agree. Now is the time. It's really quite urgent. There is a cover-up. This is not speculation. It's proven, and it can't go on. It's not tenable. It's not sustainable. It has to end at some point. I hope it doesn't take till 2047.
You and me both. You and me both, man.
But we will see. It's a very, I think, one of the cutting edges of UFO research is ending this cover-up. It's ridiculous. At some point, I don't know if the U.S. is going to do it, but someone's going to get proof. Someone's going to call down a UFO. You've heard of CE5 groups where they're trying to call this stuff down. That's getting a lot in popularity. Someone's going to get some really good evidence that way at some point. It's going to be conclusive to the point where this is no longer a mystery. We know what this is. it's not a UFO mystery. They're ETs. They're here. They've been here forever. I think people are really beginning to finally wake up. The ridicule factor is going away. More and more people say, yeah, it's fine. Use my real name. No problem. So we're real close to this being totally accepted and going mainstream.
How about have you had anybody report receiving a download? I've heard the only body I've ever heard talk about is Sammy Hagar. I think said that he thought that he had a download from extraterrestrials. Well, when I told you that I had that experience where I was pulled back out of the wall behind the bed, I had also had an experience where I laid down on the bed and it was just like immediately it happened. It was like. It would have been like the best way I can describe it is like a laser beam hit me in the forehead. It was red. I remember it was a red color. It hit me right in the forehead, about where the pineal gland would be, and I immediately start seeing images of symbols, letters, and numbers, and I could see shapes like stars, squares, circles, and it was just coming down into my mind or into my head as fast as it'd go. And it didn't hurt. I didn't get a headache or anything like that. It was just, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I kind of feel like it was a download of some kind of information. But it was geometry. It was numbers and letters and symbols, and it was just like a download. Like you just hit the button and boom, there it goes.
Yeah, I have heard this many times. Many contactees report this. I've had this myself. This is absolutely how they will transmit information. It comes all at once. It's very hard to make sense of because it's so a lot. It's a lot all at once, and it kind of starts to trickle back into your conscious awareness over time. But people will have big downloads of information, and it's a profound sort of understanding of a certain subject that they want to teach you. And I've heard the same sort of things you're describing: symbols, equations, shapes, landscapes, buildings, stuff that goes over people's head. It can go by so fast that your conscious awareness is like really dazzling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you described it very well. There's definitely something going on.
It's a good
Definitely.
sign. They're really just trying to educate people, wake them up, impart information about a variety of different subjects, and people will wake up to this at some point. There's various, like I said, triggers or cues, and suddenly you'll be like, oh, suddenly remember. I had a sighting myself once that I completely forgot. It just completely left my mind, and it was some months later that it came back spontaneously. And that sort of thing will happen to a lot of contactees. I think we're going to see more of that as time goes on.
Do you have any dreams of extraterrestrials? Have you had any conversations in the dreams with them?
Yes, I sure have. I've had a lot of sightings. Some have been very close. I've had a few telepathic communications with this. And lots of alien dreams, and they're talking to me, and I'm talking to them.
The telepathic communication that you had, the only way that I can describe when I had it was, it's not like an audible voice you hear in your head. It's more like if it is, it'd be in your voice, but it's more like a knowing. And then through this knowing, you get the words of what they're telling you. And the reason why I say that was because, before I even started seeing the lights and all that happened, I was deer hunting in an area, and I heard something coming, and I was there an hour before daylight, and whatever this thing was came within 30 yards of me, and these eyes lit up in the woods in front of me at about 30 yards. And I would say size-wise would be between maybe a maybe a baseball and a softball size. That's what the illumination looked like. They had slits in them, and they were an amber color. They were amber-colored eyes, and at first I thought that somebody was messing with me while I was hunting, like another hunter or whatever. But as I'm watching this thing, I had my gun sitting on the tree. I never tried to get my gun. I never was scared of it because, like I said, when you see something like this, it's like you're so amazed and bewildered. You're just like, am I really seeing this? Your mind is going
Yep.
like, are you really seeing this? Are you going nuts or what? And so I'm looking at these eyes, and they had black slits in them, and serpent or reptile or like cat eyes. And as I'm sitting there looking at this thing, I get the telepathic communication, like you said, and basically what it said was, I just wanted you to know that I'm here. And then the eyes winked out, like it either closed its eyes or I figured it turned its head because it continued walking on out to the field and then out of the woods and gone. But why I said that is because I had a dream that I was on board a craft and I'm walking down this hallway. The walls are illuminated, just like you couldn't see the lights, but you could see that there was light emanating out of the walls. And I'm walking, and it's kind of narrow passage. And as I'm walking, there was like the floor was almost like a grate, like a steel grate, like you could see through it, like the light was coming up through it.
Yep,
and as I'm walking down this corridor, here comes this little creature or little being about 3-4 foot tall, and it was stalky looking. It was a stalky looking being. And it wasn't. I've seen communion, later on in life, and seen the beings in communion, and they had a blue skin to them. Well, this thing didn't have blue skin. It had like pink human-looking skin, but it didn't have a nose, and its mouth was real wide, and it was wearing some kind of what looked like sunglasses like type deal. And I remember it had a blue and silver outfit on. And as it approaches me, as I'm walking down the hallway, it gets ready to pass me, and it stops, and it looks up at me, and I can hear it in its mind. It's looking at me, and then it looks down the hallway, and it says, "What's he doing here?" And I look at the end of the hallway, and there's this mantis-looking being at the end. It was like a tan color. I'm guessing maybe about 7 feet tall, and it had those amber-colored eyes with the slits in it.
There you go. Yeah.
But you have these dreams, and you think, "Is this just a dream?" But when you're having it, it's like it's more than a dream. So that's kind of how they trick us. I kind of take it. It's hard to discern.
I think it's a way to remember all this stuff without having a whole lot of trauma associated with it, because it can be very scary. And, I've had these experiences myself. I've interviewed a lot of people. Everything you're saying, the floor like a grate. I've heard that before. Walls that lit up, but there's no actual light source that you can see. Heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a message without words, but you can absolutely understand it with, and know it. I had that myself. I'd interviewed this lady who was a contactee, and she was telling me her encounters, which were really quite incredible. And I was wondering if she was telling the truth. I knew she was, because she became a very good friend. And at any rate, I'm like leaning back in my chair. I was, listening to her interview and typing it out. And suddenly I got an impulse to go onto the roof of my condo. And ran up there, and this UFO appeared right across the street, very low. And it blasted me with a message. And like you said, it wasn't in so many words. It was just a knowing. And it said, "Hi, it's us. We're real. We wanted you to know that, we're Wendy's. I'll call her Wendy. We're Wendy's ETs. She's telling the truth. Watch this if you don't believe." And that was kind of the gist of the message, but it wasn't in words so much. It was just knowing. And it starts darting around like crazy. I'm like, "Oh, okay.
Wow.
I totally believe. I'm sorry." I knew she was telling the truth. It's not like I didn't disbelieve her. It was just a lot to absorb.
When you heard that and you saw that, were you like bewildered and thinking to yourself, "Am I really experiencing this? Is this really happening?" Did you feel that way?
Yeah, because first you don't even say, "Look, it's a you." You think, "Huh, what's that? Is that a helicopter? Is that, what, am I seeing this?" Yeah, it does something to your brain. I don't know how to describe it, but you start to really question yourself because it's out of your normal experience. After it happened a number of times, I got a little more used to it. I do remember I had another similar incident where I was driving along the freeway here in California, and it was crowded. I mean, there's a lot of cars on the freeway. And I'm seeing this thing hovering over the freeway, low, and it was a big, bright globe of light. And I'm looking at the thing, thinking, what could that possibly be? Am I seeing this? Look at that. Why isn't anyone stopping? I didn't stop, but I slowed down, and I'm looking up at it, and I got a message from it. And it shocked me because, again, it wasn't in English. It was just knowing. And it basically said, your niece has just been born.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, whoa.
That's profound, man. That's profound.
And it turns out she's, the daughter of my sister-in-law, my brother.
Yeah, that gave me chills.
And my sister-in-law did see grays face to face. She did see UFOs close up. And this niece hasn't seen UFOs, but her brother did. My nephew saw a UFO and had a humanoid sighting as well.
Oh, wow.
So it's in my family. This does follow families. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about when you have something like this happen to you. And having talked to so many people, I know it's real. I've experienced it myself. Hearing you talk, it's like, more corroboration, not only for me, but for everyone out there who's listening to this.
This has been great. Hey, Preston, there's a question in the chat that's going to be interesting. It looks like, let's see, Bushwhacker, what's up, Rooster man? This is a good question. He wants to know from you, what's tall, skinny, light shape, like a human, only taller and skinnier? That's what took me from my bedroom.
Yeah, that's probably a tall white. There are different types of ETs. There's short little grays.
Wow.
3 to 4 feet tall. There's taller grays, 4 to 5 feet, even 6 feet or taller. There are short little blue-skinned humanoids. There's humanoids of all kinds. There's praying mantis, and tall whites, which are 7, 8 foot tall, very thin. It just goes on. There's a huge list. Glowing light beings, that could be it. But generally speaking, people will describe some humanoid form.
Okay, I'm sorry, he corrected me. It said it didn't take him. He grabbed its arm, and then he said we shot through space and ended up in a place that looked like Earth. Only everything was glowing orange, even the trees and grass. Wow.
Oh, wow. It's a possibility. There are out-of-body experiences as well that have a lot of similarities to this. I'd have to do further questioning to determine exactly. But the fact that he's describing a figure that doesn't look human makes me lean towards the UFO side of this.
Mm-hmm.
But people do describe, out-of-body experiences where they go to a place where everything glows. And which is related to this, because if you start having contactee experiences, UFO experiences, chances are you've probably had some paranormal experiences as well.
I had some. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. I had an out-of-body experience. I thought you might find it interesting. I'd had out-of-body experiences since I was like in my 20s. After I had seen whatever that thing was in the woods, and the last one I had, very last one that I had, I was coming out of my body and I was floating up towards the ceiling, and I get outside and I could see the trees, and I'm going up, and the thought pops into my mind, you can go anywhere you want to go. Where do you want to go? And I thought in my mind, I don't know why I said this, but I said, I want to go see Valiant Thor. And I shot through space, and it was like the longest out of body experience I ever had. It was like it took a long time, like in out of body experience. Anyway, I zipped through I remember the stars. I was zipping through the stars, and the next thing I know, I'm standing in it looked like a high-rise building to me because I could see these narrow windows on the side, and I could see outside the windows, and it was futuristic. It was like a futuristic-looking city, and there was a desk, like you would see like an executive's desk, and then there was a chair sitting behind it, and there was nobody in the office, of course, and there was it was like a whiteboard looking thing, and it had a message on the whiteboard, and it said, "I am unable to speak to you at this time." Then I shot right back in my body, but I could see stuff out the window, like a futuristic city looking thing, and things flying around, like vehicles flying around and stuff. But I didn't see any, like humanoid looking people, or I didn't see Valiant Thor, but I thought you'd find that interesting, but that was an out-of-body experience that I had. The very last one.
Yeah, see, I'm glad I mentioned that because I kind of expected that you would report out-of-body experiences. I've had them myself, and it came right at the same time I started investigating this and started having sightings and these sort of things.
Did you see yourself when you had your out-of-body experience? Were you able to see yourself?
Not always, but there have been occasions. I actually got really into it, so I did it quite a bit. And yeah,
could you see the glow? Could you see the glow around your body? Like when I did it, I could see a glow around. I mean, it was like I was ethereal. Like I could see through myself, but I could see myself. If that makes sense. And when I realized that I was having the out of body experience, I was like. I thought I bet I could see myself, and I looked down and I could see my hands, and then I could feel the warmth. I could feel the warmth of my hands, and I went downstairs. I remember going downstairs, and I was standing behind someone, and they didn't know I was even there in the room, and I could see everything they were doing on a computer. They was on a computer looking at stuff, and I could see everything they were doing. And they never knew I was there because I wasn't physically there.
Yep,
so, but that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, it's all kinds of fun. I love the out-of-body stuff, and this is something that will happen to contactees because this is what the ETs are trying to do. This is a natural human ability, and they want to wake us up to our ability to do out-of-body experiences, to do telepathy, to have clairvoyance and precognition, and to communicate with them. So this is absolutely, doesn't surprise me at all. I'm really happy actually to hear you talking about this because I'm sure there are other people out there who are having this.
Yes, I totally agree. Did you, when you had your out of body experiences, did you ever find yourself in the mountains? Were you ever in the mountains?
Oh,
like up on the top of a mountain?
Yeah, you can. For me, I started out very slowly, exploring. First my room, and then the house inside of the house, and I started flying around the neighborhood, and then I would fly out. We lived in kind of not the woods, but in a rural area. There was a mountain or behind our house. I would go flying up towards that. It's all kinds of fun. Way out in space, and you can look down on Earth, way, way down there.
And when you're having that experience, it is so profound, and it feels so good. Your body feels so good that you don't want to come. It's like you don't want to come back. At least that's what was the experience that I had. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's very, very real. I mean, the colors. I mean, everything looks so beautiful. It's the feeling. You're right. It's just absolutely indescribably good.
Let me think. Shoot, doggone it! I had a question. That's okay. Go ahead. I was going to ask something else.
We've had some good questions so far, and it's awesome to see some similarities because even people in the chat are sharing their experiences, and there's nothing better than that. That's what we're all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That,
people need to accept that this stuff happens. People talk about the paranormal like it's paranormal. It's not. This is normal. This is how it's supposed to be. We are all having out-of-body experiences every night. To be perfectly honest, I think this is something that people really need to work on remembering, because we are actually all doing it. The trick is really just remembering that you're doing it, and so you can do it consciously, and you can go anywhere. You can go anywhere on this planet. You can go to other dimensions. You can visit the other side, visit your deceased loved ones. You can visit with the ETs. You can do the possibilities are literally endless.
wow. It's just mind blowing when you have those out of body experiences, and then you realize that when you're having it, you're like fully conscious. I mean, it's not, and it's definitely not a dream, because when you have an out of body experience like that, you can look all the way around. You can look all the way around yourself, up and down, all around. You don't do that in a normal dream, and be able to see like you can when you're having the out of body experience.
It's very coherent. Dreams are very shifting and got lots of bizarre elements to them and symbolic. And you can prove it to yourself. You're having an out of body experience. You just go out of body to a location, and you can go back there and look at it physically. And you'll be like, oh, this is what I saw.
Yep. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all kinds of fun.
So you think that this isn't a bad thing then, that these things are happening? I've never really been afraid of it. I know that sounds stupid, but yeah. I've not been afraid.
No, me either. And there are some people who do have a strong fear reaction. And part of the reason, I think, is because our society is somewhat fear-based. If you look at the media, it's all, everything's like...
and it's designed... Yeah, it's designed that way. And I know what I was going to ask you was like the powers that be that try to conceal everything and hide all this information from us. Do you think that the reason why they don't want us knowing this is because once we realize what the reality is, it's going to be a total game changer, and it's like getting the genie out of the bottle, and you're not going to be able to get it back? Do you think that's kind of why they try to suppress this?
That's absolutely the main reason. I think you've hit it right on the head, exactly. Because people start waking up to the ET presence and the fact that we have a lot more power at our fingertips, and that we can communicate telepathically. We can tell when people are lying. We can do all these things, healing, and they will lose control over the populace, which, there's an element within our society which doesn't have our best interests in mind. And the cover-up is all about greed, power, and control. And people wake up to this, they will lose that. So there is an alien threat, but the alien threat is to the military-industrial complex, it's to the one percenters, it's to the people who are covering this up. They will lose their control over the people. So that's why they're covering this up. That's why they're afraid of people knowing the truth. But this is not bad for us. This is good for us.
It's like how, like, say if we do have the reverse engineer, or they're reverse engineering the Roswell crash, for example, will that put them leaps and bounds ahead of the other world powers, right? So that's coveted technology. Like that's the holy grail of their weaponry and avionics, the whole nine yards, and they don't want to give that up, because they don't want to give that secret up, because that's what makes them powerful. And I think that it's the same way with the out-of-body experiences, say, and I have this feeling that, like, even the Bigfoot creatures that people talk about seeing, and these other creatures that they're seeing, there's abilities that these things have that the powers that be don't want us to know about, because once we are on that level of knowing of what these things have, even like the ETs and the out-of-body experiences, once we have that, then it's game over. It's game over for them, because
100%.
That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, I absolutely think you're right on the money with that. And I think probably, it's not just the U.S. who has this technology. Probably, Russia certainly. I think a lot of the major powers, have reverse engineered this. Probably are working together to some extent on this. So they absolutely are trying to stop people from waking up. That is their main agenda. And the ETs aren't going to have it. And that's why we have, waves of sightings like Stephenville. So everyone who is there can say, hey, you can't tell me UFOs aren't real. I saw one. And every person is being contacted saying, you know what, shut up. I know UFOs are real. And once we have enough people who have had a personal experience, like you said, it's game over. They're done. Yes. And we're close to that.
Yeah,
this is why there's so many people talking about this. This is why it's so popular on the internet. This is why
it's starting to snowball.
TV shows. Yeah.
It's starting to snowball, and once it reaches critical mass, that's it, man.
Now we have people like Paul Hellyer, Defense Minister of Canada, talking about this. He just passed away, but really bravely, courageously stepped forward. And Senator Reid from Nevada, and now we've got people from all over the U.S. and, for that matter, the world, talking about this, who are in high levels of government.
Wasn't there somebody over in Israel, like an Israeli general or something, that referred to the Galactic Federation of, I don't know if they the Galactic Federation of Light or something like that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the Galactic Federation, in my own research, does not exist. I've got no good reporting. No, I don't think so. ETs don't have government, religion, money, a federation. They don't have a federalized system. That
sounds something like on a Star Trek, like out of Star Trek. When
it's my understanding, and I can only tell you that this is what I have learned from interviewing, hundreds of people and following up on the research of the researchers I trust, like, Barbara Lamb or Dolores Cannon or John Mack, or some of the major researchers out there who are really digging into the contactees side of this. There's no Galactic Federation. There's no treaties with the government in exchange for technology and abductions or anything like that.
They've moved past that.
Yes, exactly. Their only real government or laws or religion is ethics and morality and truth and uplifting each other. Remember, this is a very highly, highly technologically advanced beings. All of them are learned how to travel between the stars. They've overcome wars and crime and all of this stuff. No, they're working together in a cooperative and doing their best to help us, as any kind being would do, without actually coming in and solving all our problems, because it's really up to us to work out our issues. As every parent knows, you can't do everything for your child. They have to learn the hard way. And they are doing their best to wake us up and guide us without actually stepping in and saying, we'll take over. No, they're not going to do that. And there isn't, Dolly, the lady in chat, is the lady, she's the subject of my next book. She's a fully awake contactee. And don't mention Galactic Federation to her, because she will absolutely say no.
That's funny you said that. She already said that a couple minutes ago in chat. No Galactic Federation.
That's good. That's good to know. I'd heard that was not appropriate way to call them, or what, that doesn't exist.
And I hear it every now and then, and I hear people saying, "Oh, the Greys are evil. They're demonic." And I'm looking at some of these, contactees, some of these researchers, and I'm like, shame on you. I think you're lying, and I think you're lying. I think some of these people are honestly government agents. I really do. There's an enormous amount of time, money, and effort, our tax dollars, being spent to put forth an alien threat narrative that is not true. It's unwarranted, and I can almost prove, I can't prove it, but I can march out case after case after case of objective reporting, which shows that the contact experience is in its essence a benevolent experience. It can be very scary. It's initially often very scary for people. But what happens to people when they're taken on board? They're physically examined. That can be scary, especially if you're like not able to move and you're looking at these grays or praying mantis. And this is why some people don't remember, because they're traumatized and they decide, you know what? The ETs are like, this person is not ready to remember. But if someone doesn't have a real strong fear response, they're treated differently. They're given messages. They're taken to the engine room, told how this craft works. It's not uncommon. They're taken to the helm, the control room, sat in the chair. Would you like to fly the craft? Taught how to fly the craft. I've talked to many, many people who've had this experience, including Dolly. She's had this experience. I can't wait to get this book out. It's my next book.
Oh, man.
And it's going to knock
What's the
some
name of
socks
it going to
off for
be?
sure.
Do you have a name for it yet, or?
Yeah, I haven't.
Or
released
can you
the name
say?
Yet.
Okay.
I haven't released.
We'll just be looking for Preston Dennett.
Yeah, we're close to it. I'm keep getting asked, so I think maybe I should just release it. But I just want to get the book out there first.
That's awesome, Preston.
Get it, ready to go, because it's still being proofread at this point. But it's done.
Definitely let us know, because I want a copy of it. I'll definitely get one.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely.
Bless you, Preston, for writing these people's stories and telling their stories, and not judging them for it. Not ridiculing them like they've already suffered through. That's a horrible thing. And good on you, man, for doing that. That's a blessing.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think
no
all
problem.
of us have a role to play. Each person who steps forward deserves kudos, because it takes a lot of courage to talk about this.
The way that we kind of approach this show is that, we've all kind of decided that everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And if we can all come out and start discussing this without ridicule, maybe we can put these pieces of the puzzle together and paint a bigger picture of what's going on here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been doing for like 35 years, getting a piece of the puzzle from everybody. And then I meet Dolly, and she's fully conscious, and has been for like most of her life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have all the pieces already.
Man.
Like, so
that's going to be a heck of a book. That is going to be a heck of a book.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on here, Dolly. We see you in the chat room. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Just getting I always say I like to get around real people, and that means a lot when we can all get together and share these experiences, like we said, without any judgment or ridicule. That's what it's all about.
Yes, and most, there's a lot of people who aren't talking still. They're listening to this show and they're like, "Wow, thank God."
We're trying. We know what's out there, and we've seen the proof. We're just trying to, wake everybody else up if we can, and that's awesome if we can.
Yeah, it's so important. Yeah. You might not believe in UFOs. I know there are skeptics out there. They're like, this doesn't affect me. Why should I care? I'm like, well, you just wait. You're going to have a huge wake-up call when they show up in large numbers. This is something I think will probably happen at some point, is open official contact.
My cousins made fun of me because I, talked about that stuff all the time. And we used to go fishing out in they got what's called strip pits here, where the coal mine came through and stripped the ground out and then left lakes. And we'd go out. Hey, I had favorite places we'd like to go. And I just happened to be working or something. And I came home, and they were sitting in the living room. And the one looked at the other and said, "Tell him what we saw today." Like, he was real excited. Like, "Tell him what we saw." And then the one was like, "No, don't say anything. Don't get him started." And so finally, I got it out of the one that was excited. I said, "What? Tell me what you saw. What was it that you guys saw?" And they said they come out of where we like to fish, and there was a crossroads there, and they went to stop at the stop sign to turn and go back to their house. And right above them, in the four-way stop, was a silver UFO, a disc hovering above them, and they both got to see it. And it sat and what, like, I don't know if it was observing them or what, but it sat there and hovered for a second, and then it zipped off and took off. But that one didn't want to admit it because I'd been telling him all along, that they're out there, and it's real. But they was kind of scared. I think I know the one was scared.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I get it because this is a sensitive subject for people. People have their worldview, and when you see something like this, it's sort of a core belief. It sort of defines who you are and how you feel about your place in this universe. It's very much like religion and politics, and really sensitive subjects that will set people off. So I can understand why some people are like just not wanting to talk about this. But the time has come. We need to know that everyone needs to know we're not alone. We have never been alone. They're not here to take over. They're here to help us. We need their help, clearly. They're very, very concerned. We're going to destroy our planet through nuclear proliferation, pollution, our warlike ways. And they are doing everything they can to prevent that from happening again, because this has happened in the distant past, in prehistory.
If they were going to get us, if they were going to do anything like that or get us or whatever, they'd get us in a second. We'd not even see it coming. It'd just happen. What do you think? You think on, like you just mentioned, the distant past? Do you think advanced civilizations have come and gone and been destroyed? I kind of seem to think so.
I do. I think there's really, really good, compelling evidence for that. Like the ancient India talks about Vimyanas. There's, in every culture has, legends about a giant flood. It's not just Noah. This is in all cultures. There's Lemuria, Atlantis. There's some really good indications. Indigenous cultures across the United States and the world talk about how they believe they are descended directly from star people. And this is something we see in all kinds of ancient writings. All the way to cave paintings and petroglyphs and hieroglyphs. We know that ETs have been around for a very long time. There's every indication that, at places like Atlantis and Lemuria and even, before that, actually we touch on this in this book with Dolly. She's gotten some information on this, that yes, ETs told her that this has absolutely happened before.
What do you think's going on in the Arctic or the Antarctic? Preston, do you have any knowledge of why is all the world leaders going there, or what's so coveted that's down there?
Yeah, I have to. I have no information on that that's not already in the public arena. I have no inside scoop with that. I'm very wary of disinformation in this field, and if anything is far out there or off the charts weird, I hesitate
steer
to
away from it.
Yeah, put this on the back burner. Let's wait until we get some real confirmation, because there are researchers who are putting out stories that are not backed up in any way
I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
And
I know exactly who you're talking about too.
I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying I have no information on that. Could be there's stuff going on there, but I don't know.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
but like you said, there's nothing to back it up. There's no.
This is something people really need to start doing, because people are swallowing the government's line. No, UFOs aren't real, which they said for 80 years, and now they're saying, well, maybe there's something. It's like, really, you're going to believe them now? Don't believe anybody everyone must do their own thinking and really step back and acknowledge the fact that you have the ability to discern the truth by just searching knowledge out. Learn what the difference is between belief and knowledge. You know what I mean? That's an important distinction there. People believe stuff without any evidence. People need to start looking at things in a very objective, scientific way and saying, what do I know about UFOs? And I think there's enough evidence to say that's in the public arena that the UFO phenomenon is absolutely real, because it's not one person saying it, or two, or 100, or even 1,000. It's hundreds of thousands. It's 1 million people. There are 3,000 plus landing trace cases. The radar return cases are within the hundreds. I've documented 300 plus UFO healing cases. This is what started to really turn me around. I'm like, oh, maybe they're not torturing people. No, they're not. I don't have any cases of that. Literally none. They are not. There's no evidence of sadism or ETs trying to scare people. Like, I'm going. No, they're not doing that. That is not their agenda. Prove it. If you think these are demonic, prove this to me. Because I studied the whole demon phenomena. I did. I got all the books on it. It's not demons. Demons are a real thing, but it's not UFOs. It's not aliens. I can tell you that fairly conclusively, because there's no evidence of this.
Are the demons interdimensional?
Yes, it's a spiritual phenomena. It's a very, very bad haunting that follows a very set pattern that often starts out with knockings and scratchings on the wall and dark apparitions, and usually targets one person in a house, a vulnerable person, a child, someone who's ill or mentally imbalanced, perhaps, it's just a very scary haunting that can escalate all the way to spiritual attack. But it's not UFOs. People are trying to conflate these different phenomena together, like maybe Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, aliens, all are the same thing, wearing different disguises. No, where'd you come up with that? That's not true. Most people who see Bigfoot aren't seeing UFOs. If you're seeing a ghost, it's probably just a ghost. And people are having near-death experiences and saying, wow, these are very much like a UFO abduction. Yeah, there's some very interesting commonalities, but they're absolutely different phenomena. And if you do your research, and if you talk to the witnesses and experience what you can on your own, which is absolutely possible to do, you can. If you want to see a UFO, it's not that hard. Go outside, meditate, bring a flashlight, try to call them down. You might be surprised. CE5 protocols do work. If you want to see a UFO, you can. If you want to see a ghost, go to the Queen Mary. Go to some of these haunted. In every state has well-known hauntings. You can see a ghost if you want. If you want to have an out-of-body experience, it's a very simple matter of meditating. There are specific exercises you can do. The literature on this is vast. I put my own book out on this. You can do this. People really need to start thinking for themselves. Don't trust people who are known liars. And I will point a finger straight at our own government. Because they have lied from day one, and they're still lying.
Yep. And we're paying them to do it to us.
Yep, it's partly our own fault. Because if everyone got together and said no, it would make a huge difference. And we're seeing that. And this is why the government is disclosing, because they're like, we're losing control. People don't believe us anymore. They're losing credibility. That's why they're disclosing at all, because they have to.
Have you had anybody explain to you, Preston, how some of those ships work, the alien craft work?
Oh, yeah.
I met a gentleman through my buddy that was a sniper in Vietnam, and I always ask people, do you think, I'm weird. I ask, do you think there's UFO or whatever, because I'm not afraid to talk about it. I want to know, so
Yeah,
I was
sure.
talking to this gentleman, and my friend Bud had told me after I talked to him that his wife had been involved with the you remember the Iran Contra thing, the
Sure.
Iran Contra scandal. She was involved with that, and somehow she had like this. She ended up working for the government after that. It was working for the government when that was happening, and she ended up getting some kind of high position. And she had like top secret clearance or whatever. And so this guy, which would be her husband, he starts telling me about the UFOs and that they were real and there was extraterrestrials and they came from different systems and this and that, and that his wife had been in contact with them. And he's told me, he said the way that their UFOs work was the way they move or whatever. He said they could almost like, the way he described it was like a radio, like a dial on a radio where you could dial in, I don't know if it was the coordinates or, specific frequency. He said it was like frequency related, where they would dial in a certain frequency and they would jump from point A to point B. But they could dial those ships in to jump from one place to another. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he said. And always thought that was interesting how he described it was like a radio station type thing.
Yeah, one lady I interviewed was taken on board, and they flew her from New York to LA and back. And they said, "Do you get it? Do you understand?" And she said, "Oh, it's like Star Trek, like a transporter beam." And they said, "No, you're not getting it." And they did it again and said, "Now do you understand?" And she says, "No." They said, "Well, what we're doing is we're expanding and contracting space." And that was sort of, she tried to understand it, kind of went over her head. But a lot of people have gotten these sort of lessons. They're taken down to the engine room, and what is usually described to them is along the lines of magnetics and electromagnetics and using the Earth's gravitational field lines. And they would travel interdimensionally, not through wormholes, as is sometimes speculated on, but sort of through perhaps a portal might be a better way of putting it, a doorway where they leave the third dimension and then pop back into wherever they want with the right coordinates, with the right frequency, like you're saying. And these ships themselves, a number of people report this, are themselves alive. And these ships are flown not like we fly our ships. People mentally sort of get in rapport with them. So the people who are being told how to fly these things are shown. They say it's psychic. It's really all about empathy and your ability to connect telepathically with this craft, which is itself a living creature. So Dolly talks a lot about this. This is going to come up quite extensively.
Would it be beyond thought propulsion, basically, or are you using your feelings and emotions, like you said, like empathy and using emotion to fly? Is that how it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around, but I've kind of
not so much emotion, but your intuitive abilities, your ability to connect to the craft, and your ability to remote view, your ability to sort of develop a telepathic rapport with the craft. And it's there's levels, and it's complicated, and I don't fully understand it. But absolutely, the people who are flying this are psychic. They're using.
I was getting ready to ask you if those people had psychic abilities, and I was wanting to know, does Dolly have the psychic abilities?
Yes, and she's proven it to me in really, really remarkable ways. So absolutely,
I have that to a certain degree. My mom has it. My mom is a twin, by the way, and twins have. I've seen it time and time again. They know they're just in tune with each other. They know what is happening to the other, even though they're miles and miles apart. And I don't know if I got some of that from the twin aspect of it, but I have the some psychic stuff that happens. I'll know things are going to happen, or
Twin thing turns up quite a bit among contactees, by the way.
Does it?
Yeah,
wow.
It really does. There's a high prevalence of twins in the contactee population, far larger than your average people.
What about the O negative blood type? Does that have anything? Does that play into it at all?
RH negative.
RH negative. Yeah.
To some degree, absolutely. But just because you don't have a RH negative blood does not mean you're not a contactee by any means.
That's cool.
But yeah, there's a higher incidence of that as well. But I have to tell you, I've interviewed people of every ancestry. It's got nothing really to do with biology. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, they are following genetics. But people of all ancestries, whether you're black, white, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, what have you, I've interviewed all of them. They're all having contact. I've interviewed people of every, educational level. Men and women, it's equally divided. It's not blood type. There are certain patterns. One pattern is, of course, if it's in your family, because it does follow that families. But another is are you doing good work for humanity on some level? Because a lot of contactees are profoundly psychic. That is a pattern. There are a lot of doctors, teachers, artists, musicians, animal rights activists, environmentalists. Almost as a rule, people who are having contact are very concerned about our environment, have a huge connection to animals. So all of these are little patterns that turn up for sure.
Wow, that's interesting.
The animal thing is a big thing. I've yet to meet a contactee who's doesn't have some unusual animal stories.
Like animals being attracted to them, type, for instance.
Yeah.
Because I just had an experience during deer season where 2 bobcat kittens tried to climb the tree with me, and the mama cat was 20 yards away from me, and I moved to get them to go down the tree. But when I first seen them come out of the woods, the first thought that came to my mind was, ooh, I wouldn't want to get between the mama and those babies, and I'll be darned if they didn't come right down the field and climb the tree I was in. And I noticed that my tree stand, the seat had tear marks on it, like they'd been coming up and sitting in my tree stand and clawing at the seat. And what I did was, I know this is going to sound stupid, but when the babies jumped down the tree, the mama started growling at me, and I didn't grab for my crossbow or nothing because it was bow season. I didn't grab for my gun, my crossbow. Like I said, I just I put my arms out and I just calmly talked to that bobcat, and I said, "Everything's going to be okay, Mom." I said, "You're not going to, your babies are not going to be hurt. I'm not going to hurt any of you and do anything bad." And I said, "Now, Mom, go get your babies." And I pointed at the cats, and that bobcat took off running towards her babies and was growling at me all the way down the field. But that could have been a bad situation.
Yep.
But, I've had birds land on me. My cats don't act like regular cats. I have a connection with them, and it's almost I don't know if your contactees have had this experience that are like this, but it's almost like you can read the mind of the animal. It's like you understand their emotions and feelings.
Exactly.
Because that's the only way I can describe it, and they appreciate it. The animals appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad I brought that up because I knew it. I knew you were going to tell me something like this because they always comes up. People talk about whenever I go to someone's house, the animals run to them. I've had a number of unusual animal experiences myself, not to the degree some of like Dolly. You should hear her stories. I had to include it in the book because it's outrageous. She's talking about exactly what you're talking about. She was out in the Florida Everglades and had all kinds of stuff like that going on.
Wow.
So, yeah. I'm glad I mentioned it.
What an honor to have you guys on here and have Dolly come in the chat room, and that's amazing, man. I can't wait to see your book. I want to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be amazing. Is it going to be available on Amazon, or is it going to be like an ebook, or is it going to be paperback, or have you decided yet?
Yeah, paperback and ebook and Audible. I hope to get it on Audible as well.
Oh wow, that'll be. Oh man, I'd listen to that on Audible. That'd be awesome. That would be awesome. How long does it take you to write a book, Preston? If I could ask you.
It's a trick question because really the research takes a good couple of years. I've been in touch with Dolly since 2017, and have been done hundreds.
Is it always evolving? Is it all constantly evolving too? Like more information.
Yeah. It takes me a good 6 months to put a book together. At this point, I could probably do it faster if I had all the research done, but I like to take my time and get everything right. I record all the interviews I do with witnesses, and then I transcribe them. Very, very careful. I have to do fact checking. You want to find character references. You have to do a lot of homework to make sure that this is a legit story. It takes a good year or two to write a book, but once you got all the research done, I could probably whip it out in 4 to 6 months.
Oh, that's amazing. How many books have you written, Preston, if I could ask?
I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, but 28. 28 books.
Wow. That's pretty good, man. That's really how many years has it taken you to do it?
Well, I started researching in 1986 and was in this field for 10 years and had written about 30 or 40 articles. And my first book came out in 1996. And since then, I started putting out one per year. And then after about 10 years, I started putting out 2 per year per average. Wow. So, I was in this field for 10 years before my sister-in-law was like, you've got to write a book. You're writing articles. Why don't you write a book? I'm like, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe I should. I wasn't looking for this. I was never thought in a million years I would be studying UFOs. But I'm happy about it. I can tell you that it's so interesting.
I bet it's been a wild ride for you, hadn't it?
Oh yeah, talking to people like you, and kind of predicting what you're going to say. I'm like, oh, I bet she's got an animal story. I bet she's had an out-of-body experience. Let's see, because that's fun for me. Yeah, and getting to meet Bud Hopkins and Chris Bledsoe and a lot of these famous people in the field.
What was the guy's name you mentioned? His name was Mack. What was his name? The guy's
John Mack. Yeah.
John Mack. What happened to John Mack, Preston? Did something happen to him? Like, did somebody take him out, or did he just pass away on his own, or do you know?
No, I don't believe it was anything nefarious to it. He was hit by I believe a drunk driver, and it was very well researched. The guy did not flee the accident. He's been, very much forward with what happened. It was an accident, as near as I can tell. That's what his family believes. There was another book written about John Mack just recently. The researcher who looked into it agrees. There was he wasn't taken out. Though that has happened to some UFO researchers, I think. Leonard Stringfield did get death threats, and he is the guy who was looking into crash retrievals. And some of the people he talked to did die under mysterious circumstances, witnesses. And I wonder about some of the UFO researchers who have, died under suspicious circumstances. But I think it more often happens to whistleblowers or, that sort of thing. Robert Sarbacher.
Did you ever meet Howard Menger? Did you ever meet him?
No, I didn't. That was a bit before I don't know when he passed away actually, but this is a case I certainly looked into. The whole contactee era of the 50s was fascinating to me because a lot of researchers have been like, oh, they were all hoaxers. I'm like, really? Because some of them have photographs and a lot of them have multiple witnesses. George Adamski, his story is kind of crazy, but he had 4 people watch him walk up to a landed UFO and meet with this humanoid, and they have never retracted their stories. Never.
Wow.
And Howard Menger had a number of witnesses too. And Daniel Fry was a rocket scientist, a pretty good witness. These are people who said, oh, they had friendly contact with human-looking extraterrestrials. And researchers like, well, that only happened in the 50s. Like, no, the contactee era never stopped. It was sort of pushed underground when these grays started coming, parts of grays started coming in large numbers. But it never stopped. It's still going on. I've talked to many people who've had those exact same experiences. So I tend to think there's legitimacy to accounts like Daniel Fry, in particular, Truman Bethurum, a lot of these guys, Howard Menger, Orfeo Angelucci, George Adamski. A lot of researchers are taking a second look at these guys because there could very well be legitimacy to their accounts.
What about George Van Tassel? Is his name George Van Tassel?
Yes.
The giant rock guy and they built the Integratron, right? Or he was working on building the Integratron.
Yeah, I went there. I've been inside it. It's actually really cool.
Is it really? It looks like it's really neat.
Yeah, it's quite a bit bigger than you might think. It's and it's really a shame that it wasn't finished because he allegedly was building this on the instructions from the ETs, and it was going to have copper around it and some rotating magnetic stuff, which is something we see a lot on board UFO accounts. So it would have been really fascinating if that had been completed, but it wasn't. I think he was probably a legit contactee. He did call down UFOs in front of people successfully. Giant Rock was one of the biggest UFO conventions still up to this day.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people will go there.
Isn't it true that the Integratron doesn't have any nails in it or something like that? Like I don't think there's any like metallic nails or anything in it, is there?
Oh, is that right? I'm gonna have to look that up.
Well, that would make sense, being if there was going to be magnetics in it.
Yeah. Well, now you got me curious because I don't know that.
I thought I heard something about there was no nails in it. It was built without nails, so that'd be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
Doesn't it sit over? It sits over an aquifer, right? Isn't there an aquifer underneath it? I think.
I don't know that either. But I have talked to people who've were there during that time, and one lady, she was, did meet him, and said that he's absolutely legit, and that he was in contact and had shown UFOs to many of his friends.
Didn't he have ties to Howard Hughes too? Like, wasn't Howard? I think Howard Hughes helped finance the Integratron, didn't he?
I don't know, but you're making me really curious now.
Just that tie alone, just with what is it, Albert, or what's his name? Hughes? I can't think of what it. Howard Hughes, yeah, Howard Hughes, yes. I listened to some of the tapes of George Van Tassel, and he talked about a being from somewhere called Segunda. I think is what he called the alien.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
It's been a while since, I have looked into his story, but there's so much information. It's hard to track it all.
Oh, yeah. Well, Preston, you want to call it a night? We've talked your ear off, man. I feel bad, but I really have enjoyed it, man.
Hey, you have to forgive us. We can do this stuff. Man,
we went 5 hours awesome. One night. Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I love talking about this stuff. I can go all day and all night. So
will you come on again sometime, Preston?
Yeah, he has to definitely plug his book when he finds out the title and let us know about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Will
would
you come on
love-
again sometime?
Yeah, sure, anytime. Yeah,
Awesome, man.
give me
We've
a call.
really enjoyed it.
I didn't even touch on USOs, unidentified
Oh,
submersible
man.
object, or UFOs over
Yeah.
private
See,
theaters.
you have to forgive us. We get so excited. It can start off with so many things and venture out into only God knows what.
Yeah, well, it's fun.
The USOs that you're talking about, did you have any reports of them coming up out of the water up in the Great Lakes? I think is it Lake Erie? They see them up there.
Yeah, well, I know of reports. I haven't investigated any personally in that area, but I know it's a huge USO hotspot. I've got reports from all over the world, really. Lake Miccosukee in Florida, Lake Hamilton in Arkansas, up and down the East Coast, mostly here on the Southern California coast in the Santa Catalina Channel. Got like 150, no kidding, reports.
Wow. Isn't there supposed to be like a base off the coast of Malibu or something like that? Isn't there something off? There's some kind of underwater anomaly there?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I was tracking all these reports and I'm putting them on a map. I'm like, there's probably a base around here somewhere. I bet there is. And then lo and behold, the Malibu anomaly gets discovered. I'm like, I told you, I just knew it. Here's this weird structure right in the thick of all these reports. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this. Is it natural? Is it human-made? Is it an ET base? Is it a tunnel, a cave, what have you? But
a submarine base.
I can't say for sure it's in the center of a lot of USO activity. So I tend to.
Do you know how that lines up with China Lake? For what I'm talking about, the base, the China Lake, is that close to where China Lake is or not?
Yes and no. I've had a number. Once I started doing research in this area, I had a guy within government who has been in contact with me for a while. Said, "Oh well, here you're talking about USOs. There's a tunnel that leads from the Santa Catalina Channel to area or Edwards Air Force Base, which is basically China Lake, and all the way to Area 51."
Wow.
And started getting, did my research on it and found out that, there is some really good reporting on this. So I think, there's a connection there. That could be something.
Do you subscribe to the underground base thing that people talks about, the underground bases and the underground train system that goes across the United States? Have you heard of that?
Yeah,
I've just heard bits and pieces of it. I've seen some blueprints.
Well, the government has admitted that there's a number of these. Cheyenne Mountain Complex is not unique. There's a lot of underground military stuff across the U.S. and the work of Richard Sauter, who is the guy who's really specialized on this, is really compelling. Yes, we have a whole underground city beneath the U.S., and many countries are doing this. There's been quite a few programs on television about this. A lot of researchers looked into it, and the evidence is there in the public arena, absolutely, that there are huge and vast and extensive underground tunnel systems and bases under various Air Force bases, military bases across the U.S. and the world, for sure.
Wow. I had a buddy that works in the Pentagon, or worked in the Pentagon, and I DJ'd his wedding for him, and he talked to me when I DJ'd his wedding, and he kind of pulled me over to the side, and we was talking, and he was telling me, he said, you hear all this stuff about how corrupt the government is. He said, it absolutely is. And he told me, he said he was taken to Colorado, and he got to stay for 2 weeks underground in a city underground. And he said it had malls, it had postal service, it had 2-lane highways, it had train systems, and the whole 9 yards. And he said he hated it. He hated being under there. He didn't like it at all. and couldn't
Oh,
wait to
really?
get back to the surface. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm concerned about it because it's not constitutional to be using our tax dollars to
And concealing it
for
from
all
us.
of it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one thing if you're being truthful and transparent, but according to the ETs, we are facing a possible existential crisis. You know, we could have basically a CME, coronal mass ejection, which will
Yes.
knock out all electricity on our planet, cause massive fires. We could have an environmental collapse to the degree where, you know, there are massive tidal waves and hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. And
We're seeing the.
yeah, we
Go ahead.
are. And I think the military is probably trying to go underground and say, you know what, we're going to survive this. No, I don't think you will. I mean, if that really happens and the Earth is in trouble, there's a very good chance ETs will land and scoop people up. Those who are ready, those who are awake, those who've done the work, those who are, you know, contactees and have really tried to reach out and are good people. There might be widespread loss of life, and that's okay. There is life after death. Death is a lie. It doesn't really exist. We all get, you know, go to the other side and come back. But Earth might be in trouble, and we could be looking at some real rough times ahead if people do not start waking up to their own autonomy, start throwing off the shackles of basically, you know, slavery that have been imposed upon us. And I hate to use that word, but
no, it's truth. You hit the nail on the head. And you know, Preston, me and you and all of us out here, we just want to live in peace and be left alone and just live our lives the best that we can. And we're the majority of us out here are peaceful, and you know, we love humanity. We love life, and it's just a few of these bad people that's creating the problems and making the rest of us suffer, and it's not fair. And I don't know what the solution is, but sometimes I feel like humanity just needs to say enough's enough, and if you guys want to live like that, you go right ahead. You live that way, but we're not subscribing to you anymore.
yeah,
I wish
that's
we
the
could.
solution.
I wish we could collectively get together and just say we're done with you. We're not listening to you no more. You're not going to push your agendas on us anymore. We're done. And we're going to live in concert with the earth, and we're going to live in nature and peace and abundance.
Yep, that's
the way it was set
solution.
up and intended to be. Yep.
Exactly. And that's why I think the ETs are working very hard to wake people up psychically and wake people up morally and ethically and to heal them and to push us to moving, you know, away from fossil fuels and away from nuclear use of nuclear materials. That's exactly the solution there. We just need to let love and truth and compassion guide our actions. Don't listen to the lies. You know, reject it. Live autonomously.
I love what the Hopis say, the Hopi prophecy that says that we are the ones that we are waiting on, or waiting for. I love that. If you sit and think about that, the solution is in our hands, and our, you know, it's up to us. It's
Exactly.
just, we all live on, you know, like we've got 15 acres here. I live on 15 acres. I could grow my own food. I could be self-sufficient. I don't have to rely on the government to bring me something to eat. If I want or need food, I can do it myself. And, people have a yard and they can grow their own food, but we've gotten away from that, and we've been dumbed down and we've become complacent. And I think getting back to nature and the way that things used to be, it would be a beautiful thing if we could do it and accomplish it. I think.
Yeah, we have
I don't
to.
know, maybe. Yes.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's crucial. And you don't have to have a huge backyard to grow, you know, a lot of food. You can do actually indoors.
Absolutely.
You can grow tomatoes really effectively right next to your window. Lettuce. You can grow all kinds of things in a very small patch of land. And there are community gardens. There are ways to do this if you're in a position where you're not able to. There's ways to overcome that.
And for example, city parks, for example, why could they not plant fruit trees in the city parks and all over the place? And then maybe people that are homeless that need food, they could go down to the park and get an apple or get a pear, or, have a little bit of food.
Yeah,
great point.
Everyone in my street pretty much has an orange tree and a lemon tree or a grapefruit, all kinds of fruit trees where I live.
Oh man, that's awesome. Does it take a long time for them to grow, Preston? An orange tree or lemon tree?
No, it takes no, not at all. I mean, if you're growing it from a seed, it's going to take a year or two for sure. But if you get a little sapling, you'll have oranges within a year or two.
I bet your guys' oranges are like very nutritious and have a lot of nutrients in them.
Yes.
I had heard that. Go ahead. Sorry.
They're delicious. That's all. Yeah, you're right. They're good.
A buddy of mine told me that he was doing some research and said that nowadays the store-bought oranges that you get, you have to eat the equivalent of 8 oranges to get the vitamin C that one orange that our grandparents would have given them. I thought, man, that's pretty sad if that's true.
Yeah. The tomatoes look nice and red, but they're kind of tasteless.
Oh, man, isn't that awful? Hey, we have, I just have to tell you, Preston, we got some really awesome tomatoes here in Indiana, man. The people in Florida covet our tomatoes from here. They're delicious.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, Preston, I think we probably better cut this off. We're at the 3-hour mark. I guess we've stretched this out and kept you up too late, man. I'm sorry.
Hey, I love it. So thank you. It's been an honor.
It's been an honor to have you on here, man. I really appreciate you coming on and giving a little channel like us a chance to have a great conversation.
Yes,
with
sir,
good
man. It's been awesome.
And thank you for having Dolly get on here and come to the show. Thank you, Dolly, and the Rooster. We got a buddy named Bushwhacker and the Rooster over there.
Yes, and he said he's trying to send you he's got us another video of I think of something on there, so we'll have to check that out for him.
Okay, we'll do that. Well, Preston, I'm gonna turn our exit song on and head on out if that's okay with you. It's good talking to you, buddy.
Yeah, same here. Appreciate it.
We'll have.
Thanks very much.
Oh man, I wish you many good fortunes with your new book, man. I'll be looking for it.
All right.
How long do you think it'll be, Preston? Can you give us an ETA, or is it just whenever?
I'm gonna say less than 2 months. It depends on a few things. I'm trying to get Dolly to do a few sketches of the ETs, which she's working on. Got my sister-in-law doing the cover. Then it has to go through the whole process of being proofread. But yep, it's due to be published.
Work in progress.
Hey, will you shoot us a message and let us know, Preston, if you can remember to when you're done, get it done? I'd like to buy one, and I'm sure David would also. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you got it.
Awesome, man. Well, good night, everybody. It's been another awesome show, and thank you very, very much, Preston. Thank you, and bless you, man. Bless you.
Awesome.
You're doing good. You're doing good work, Preston. Good night, everybody.
Hey.